HQ with characteristic lack of urgency. It was horrifying, yes, but nothing surprised him after the betrayal that had shaken their world. Humans using Pokémon as tools of war, just another sin in a growing list. Lighting a cigarette, Angel took a drag and exhaled toward the darkening sky. He felt unbearably tired of the heat, of the bloodshed, of everything. If it were up to him, he might have stayed in some quiet corner of the world and let humanity sort out its own messes. But Makima had asked him to stay on, and for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, he had. A crackle came over his portable COMM device. He expected more local updates, but instead heard a familiar Japanese voice from the PSIA comms officer. Attention all operatives. Immediate recall order issued. Drop all tasks and return to Tokyo HQ. Code name, Homecoming. Repeat, all agents, return home. Angel blinked slowly, unsure if he'd dozed off and imagined that. He pulled the earpiece closer. The message repeated. It was real. He let out a short, dry laugh that drew a curious glance from a passing peacekeeper. Hey! They're pulling the plug, Angel muttered. Part of him was impressed. Things must be utterly dire for HQ to cut off field intel entirely. Another part of him, the exhausted and cynical part, was simply relieved. Finally, an excuse to leave this hellish place behind. With a sigh, Angel flicked away his half-smoked cigarette. It landed in the dirt next to a spent rifle cartridge. He tapped his COMM. Angel here, he said in a flat tone. Acknowledged. Leaving now? He didn't even ask for details. Nothing surprised him, remember? The response was immediate. Safe travels, Angel. Tokyo awaits. Over and out. Angel rolled his eyes at the cheery formality. Tokyo awaits, he repeated under his breath, voice dripping with a mix of sarcasm and longing he'd never admit. He stood there for a moment, watching the sun sink below the horizon. A burnt orange afterglow lit the savannah and silhouetted the wreckage of an armored vehicle in the distance. It was almost poetic, in a bleak way. He remembered Aki once telling him that if he ever got tired of it all, he should come back and they'd all share a proper meal, beer, ramen, the works. At the time, Angel had scoffed, but now the idea of sitting around a noisy table with those idiots, it didn't sound so bad. Better than this endless war, anyway. He adjusted the rifle slung at his back and started walking toward the makeshift helipad where an extraction chopper usually came at dusk. As he passed the evacuees, a little girl with tear-streaked cheeks looked up at him. She held out something, a single white feather, dirted at the tip. For you, Mzungu, she said in a trembling voice, mistaking him for some foreign soldier. Angel paused. His first instinct was to wave her off. He wasn't in the mood for sentimental gestures. But something in her expectant gaze softened him. He took the feather gently. Thank you, he replied, mustering a faint smile. The girl managed a tiny smile back before being ushered along by a relief worker. He turned the feather between his fingers as he continued on. White, like an angel's wing, how ironic. If only she knew the code name Angel wasn't because of any virtue on his part. Stuffing the feather into his vest pocket, Angel picked up his pace. The sooner he left this place, the better. A half-remembered quote surfaced in his mind, something about angels returning home at twilight. He snorted. How fitting. A distant thump of rotors signaled the approach of the helicopter. Angel raised a hand to shield his eyes from the gust of dust as it descended. A field officer waved him over. Climbing aboard, Angel settled into a seat and closed his eyes as the chopper took off. The cabin was quiet save for the thrum of the blades. He felt the weight of exhaustion pulling him down, but also unexpectedly a small flicker of relief. Maybe even hope, buried deep under layers of apathy. He was going back. They all were. Makima, Hiroshi, Aki, the whole gang of misfits. Angel allowed himself a ghost of a smile at the thought of Aki's probable nagging about him smoking too much, or Power's inevitable boastful lies, or Denji's stupid jokes. He'd never admit it out loud, but he had missed them. As the helicopter banked eastward, chasing the last line of dying sunlight, Angel let the weariness take over and rested his head back. If the end was coming or whatever this recall signified, at least he wouldn't face it alone. Home, hey, he whispered, almost wistfully, to the empty air. The feather in his pocket fluttered slightly with the vibration, as if in agreement. Angel shut his eyes, the ghost of a smile still on his lips, and finally allowed himself to look forward to tomorrow. Chapter 23, Madoka. Madoka PSIA Field Agent, North America. Under the fluorescent lights of a small office in Washington, D.C., Madoka rubbed his tired eyes and glanced at the clock. 3:47 a.m. His makeshift desk at the Japanese embassy was strewn with analysis reports, satellite images, and half-empty coffee cups. He had spent the last week liaising with American intelligence, chasing any hint of the rogue PSIA cabal that had vanished after the Pokémon lab heist. It was meticulous, draining work, the kind Madoka excelled at but despised all the same. He leaned back in his chair, stretching his stiff neck. On the wall, the flags of Japan and the US hung side by side, a reminder that he was far from home. Madoka's fingers hovered over his keyboard as he prepared to draft yet another encrypted update to Tokyo. Despite the hour, his nerves wouldn't let him rest, too much was at stake. A soft chime from his secure laptop snapped him out of his trance. A new message had popped up on the screen, marked ultra high priority. Frowning, Madoka clicked it. As he read the content, his heart thudded painfully in his chest. Effective immediately, Operation Homecoming. All PSIA agents, report back to Tokyo HQ at once. Travel arrangements in progress. Destroy all local intel caches. Code Black. Madoka pushed his chair back, the wheels squeaking on the tiled floor. He read it again, hand shaking slightly on the mouse. Code Black. They had practiced for doomsday scenarios, but he never imagined he'd see one executed. A full recall, every agent off the grid. It meant only one thing: the final confrontation was imminent, and the old intelligence channels were potentially compromised or no longer needed. Jesus, he whispered, lapsing into English in shock. Immediately he stood and began gathering sensitive documents off the desk. Years of caution propelled him into action. If the directive said destroy intel caches, he would not question it. Madoka methodically fed papers into a nearby shredder, then pulled out a lighter for the most sensitive ones. No time for a burn bag outside. He set them aflame right in a metal trash bin, watching the edges curl to black. He removed a flash drive from his laptop containing weeks of painstaking analysis and hesitated only a second before placing it under the lighter's flame as well. The plastic bubbled and charred, data irretrievable. A pang of futility hit him as he dropped the molten remains into the bin. So much work, wiped out in seconds. But such was the order. Within minutes, the room was clear of anything classified. Madoka grabbed his go-bag from under the desk. It was always packed for emergency exfil. He caught a glimpse of himself in the darkened window, slightly disheveled suit, loosened tie, a haunted look behind his glasses. He allowed himself a bitter chuckle. I really thought I'd left this madness behind once, he murmured. He remembered the day he almost resigned after his team was massacred in that coordinated hit, the day he handed Makima his letter and walked away, in another life. Yet here he was, drawn back in. Maybe he simply couldn't abandon his colleagues when things fell apart. Or maybe Makima had convinced him, in her calm, persuasive way, that he was still needed. Either way, there was no turning back now. As Madoka powered down and wiped his laptop, a deep sense of dread settled in his stomach. If Hiroshi was back and Makima was issuing Code Black, Tokyo would become the eye of the storm. He'd be walking straight into whatever nightmare was unfolding. He slung his bag over his shoulder and left the office, locking it behind him. The embassy's corridor was silent, almost eerily so. At this hour, only a few security personnel roamed, and they paid him no mind as he made his way out to the cool night. Under the streetlights on Massachusetts Avenue, Madoka pulled out his phone to send the required acknowledgement. His thumb hesitated. A memory flickered: a rooftop in Tokyo, not long after the betrayal, where he confessed to Makima his fear of dying pointlessly. She had looked at him with an understanding he didn't expect and said, "Then let's make sure none of our deaths are pointless, Madoka." He inhaled sharply and tapped out his reply. Madoka acknowledged. Returning to Tokyo. Almost instantly, a response pinged with flight details. They'd booked him on a military transport leaving Andrews Air Force Base at dawn. Of course they had. Makima's efficiency never failed. Madoka pocketed the phone and flagged down a black embassy sedan already idling by the curb. They'd anticipated his departure to be immediate. As he slid into the back seat, he allowed a moment of introspection. He was scared, only a fool wouldn't be, but also curious, in spite of himself, about how it would all play out. Would this recall be the start of Japan clawing back what was lost? Or the prelude to something even worse? The driver cast him a questioning glance through the rear-view mirror. "Where to, sir?" "Andrews Base," Madoka said quietly. "I have a flight." He felt the finality of those words. This was really happening. As the car glided through the sparse early morning traffic, Madoka relaxed his head against the headrest. The neon glow of 24-hour diners and the occasional honk of a taxi gradually gave way to the quiet, wide roads toward the airfield. He found himself thinking of the team, the ragtag group of eccentric, brave fools he'd be rejoining. Denji, Power, those two would surely cause a scene the moment they all assembled. The thought actually made Madoka smile. Aki would try to corral them, Himeno would crack a joke to ease the tension, Kobani might cry from relief, or stress, or both. Angel would probably wander off to find a quiet corner, and Kishive, well, Kishive would likely break out a flask and mutter about damn kids. Madoka realized with a faint sense of surprise that he was looking forward to seeing them. Whatever terror lay ahead, he wouldn't face it alone. Perhaps that was why he'd returned after all, not just duty, but a quiet loyalty to those who had bled alongside him in the dark. The sedan turned onto the tarmac where a hulking C-130 transport plane waited under floodlights. The driver handed Madoka his passport and a set of papers. "Safe journey, Mr. Madoka," he offered. Madoka stepped out, the cool pre-dawn breeze carrying the smell of jet fuel. He took a deep breath and steeled himself. "Thanks," he replied, then added softly as he gazed at the aircraft, "See you on the other side." Clutching his bag, Madoka walked toward the plane's lowered ramp. Each step felt weighty with the knowledge that he was marching toward whatever endgame fate had in store. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of something beyond fear, resolve, and maybe even hope. Homeward bound, he thought as he ascended into the belly of the plane. No matter what awaited in Tokyo, they would face it together. And for Makima, for Hiroshi, for all of them, Madoka would do everything in his power to ensure that, this time, no one's death, including his own, would be in vain. He settled into a canvas seat amidst a handful of other operatives and buckled in. As the engines roared to life, Madoka closed his eyes and let out the breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Here we go," he whispered into the trembling air, bracing himself for the journey back to where he belonged. Tokyo PSIA headquarters, dawn. In Tokyo, dawn's first light crept through the skyline as Makima stood in the lofty PSIA command center, eyes fixed on a digital world map glowing on the wall. One by one, green indicators each representing a recalled field agent blinked on from every corner of the globe. Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas, they were all coming home. She clasped her hands behind her back, maintaining a composed silhouette in the quiet hum of the control room. Inside, Makima's heart swelled with a mix of apprehension and steely resolve. This was the moment she had been preparing for ever since the betrayal shattered their ranks. Now, with Hiroshi returned at her side and her loyal team converging on Tokyo, the real fight could begin. Behind her, the command room doors slid open softly. Makima didn't need to turn to know who it was. The familiar calm of Hiroshi Kobayashi stepped up beside her, his reflection appearing in the glass. He followed her gaze to the world map as the last few lights winked on. "They're on their way," Makima said quietly, her voice almost reverent in the stillness. Hiroshi nodded, his young face composed but eyes blazing with determination. "All of them," he affirmed. In the reflection, Makima saw the slightest of smiles tug at his lips. Hope, in spite of the darkness ahead. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The sun was rising over Tokyo Bay, bathing the city in a pale golden glow. It illuminated the two figures standing united against the coming storm. Makima allowed herself a small breath of relief. They had recalled every last agent, pulled all her pieces back to the board. Whatever came next, she would face it with the only people in the world she truly trusted. She finally turned to Hiroshi, a resolute spark in her amber eyes. "It's time." Hiroshi met her gaze and replied with the certainty of someone who had walked through fire and come out tempered. "Let's end this," he said. High above the waking city, Makima and Hiroshi stood shoulder to shoulder as Tokyo dawned anew. Far below, the first hints of a new day's bustle began, unaware of the quiet war council convening in the sky. Chapter 24, Operation Tokyo Purge. A low hum of fluorescent lights resonated through the concrete hall, casting sharp white beams across the secret underground facility in Tokyo. Dozens of chairs were arranged in rows before a blank projection screen and a long steel table, a makeshift war room hidden far beneath the city's busy streets. Elite PSIA field agents from every corner of the globe filled the space, freshly recalled and still wearing the dust and tension of far-flung missions. Despite the reunion of familiar faces, an uneasy silence hung over them. All of them had the same question etched in their eyes: why have we been called home? Aki Hayakawa stood near the front, arms crossed tightly over his chest. The tail end of a bandage peeked from under his sleeve, a souvenir from the Eastern European raid he'd led days ago. His dark hair was tied back in its usual topknot, and his sharp gaze flickered between his colleagues. Ever vigilant, Aki was on edge, scanning for any hint of what awaited them. Nearby, Himeno leaned against the wall with a casual pose belied by the slight furrow in her brow. She toyed with an unlit cigarette between her fingers, resisting the urge to light it. Himeno's single eye, the other covered by a black patch, swept over the room, and for once she had no witty remark to break the tension. She simply offered Kobani a reassuring shoulder to lean on. Kobani sat in a chair just behind Aki, nervously wringing her hands in her lap. The young woman's eyes were red at the corners, as if she might have been crying moments earlier. She flinched at every distant sound of machinery in the facility, the enormity of the situation gnawing at her. Kobani sucked in a shaky breath. Do you think we're in trouble?" she whispered to Himeno, voice quavering. Himeno gave her a gentle pat on the shoulder. "We'll be fine," she said softly. A warm, confident smile spread on Himeno's lips, a deliberate gesture to soothe the trembling rookie. "We're all together this time. Whatever this is, we face it side by side." Kobani managed a tiny nod, clutching a tissue in one hand like a lifeline. On the other side of the aisle, Denji sprawled with restless energy across his seat. One foot tapped erratically against the floor. His jacket was still stained with a bit of South American mud, and a faint bruise marked his cheek, but those were like badges of honor to him. Denji blew out a sigh and grumbled under his breath. "Man, they really got us waiting around," he muttered not so quietly. He fished in his pocket and popped a stick of gum into his mouth, chewing loudly to cut the silence. "Could you not chew like a cow, Denji?" Aki hissed, shooting him a sidelong glare. Even in the tense atmosphere, Denji's lack of decorum managed to grate on him. Denji shrugged, still chomping away. "What? I'm bored. We've been here, what, an hour? 2? And nobody's told us squat." He craned his neck around the room as if expecting answers to be written on the walls. "They yank us out of missions, fly us back to Tokyo on the double, and now we just sit. It's killing me. He paused, then added with a spark of anticipation, better be something huge. Across from Denji, Power was perched on the back of a chair rather than sitting properly, her combat boots leaving muddy prints on the seat. She had one arm slung over the chair's top, chin propped on her hand, and an expression of supreme impatience. Dust smeared her face, and her unruly blonde red hair was still wild from whatever skirmish in North Africa she'd come from. Power snorted at Denji's complaint. "Ha! You're just mad you didn't get to finish beating up those smugglers," she scoffed. Her crimson eyes gleamed in the harsh light as she reminisced. "At least I completed my mission. I slaughtered the entire enemy squad in the Sahara." Boom, boom, she clapped her hands quietly, as if mimicking an explosion, then flashed a toothy grin. They never stood a chance against the almighty Power. Denji rolled his eyes, leaning back with his chair tipped on two legs. "Yeah right. Bet half of them ran away from your smell," he jibed. Despite his frustration, a competitive smirk tugged at his lips. Power immediately bristled, pointing an accusatory finger. "What was that? Do you wish to lose your remaining brain cells?" she growled. A few nearby agents glanced over, stifling chuckles at the familiar bickering. Aki's eyebrow twitched. Even now, those two were incorrigible. "Will you two knock it off?" he whispered sharply. He realized their banter came from nerves as much as habit. Denji and Power always made a scene, but this time their voices carried a tinge of uncertainty. Aki decided distraction might keep them calm. "Denji, you might want to sit properly before." Before he could finish, Denji's precariously balanced chair finally tipped too far. "Whack!" Denji yelped as it clattered to the floor behind him, dumping him flat on his back. The sudden noise shattered the quiet. Power howled with laughter, and even a few others cracked smiles. "Idiot," Aki sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Denji scrambled up, cheeks burning as he righted the chair. From the back of the room came a low chuckle. "Same old brats." Kishive had been watching the exchange with amused, tired eyes. The scar-faced veteran leaned against the wall, arms folded and a silver flask in one hand. Kishive's leather jacket still carried the scent of sand and cigarette smoke from his mission in the Middle East. He shook his head, speaking around the unlit cigarette between his lips. "I go away for a few months and you two are still raising hell wherever you go. I'm almost relieved." He took a swig from his flask, then added dryly, "At least I know you're alive." Power puffed out her chest proudly. "Of course I'm alive. It'll take more than some terrorists and tin pot militias to kill me." Denji rubbed the back of his head, grinning sheepishly. "Hat, we're too tough to die. Right, Pops?" Kishive snorted at the nickname. "Don't get cocky, kid. You and Power nearly gave me heart failure with your so-called training antics in those warehouses." He capped his flask and tucked it away as his expression turned a shade more serious. "All jokes aside, if Makama called every one of us back here, it's not for tea and cookies. Something big is going on." Chapter 25, Tokyo Purge, 2. At that, a hush fell again. The weight of Kishive's words was sobering. A man of his experience didn't issue warnings lightly. Madoka, sitting a few seats over, nodded in agreement. The bespectacled agent had a laptop and several folders spread on his lap, remnants of whatever analysis he'd been doing in Washington, D.C. Dark circles underscored his eyes behind his glasses, but he was alert. "He's right," Madoka said quietly. He straightened his slightly disheveled suit jacket. "A full recall of all operatives, that never happens. Not unless everything we've been working on is coming to a head. I suspect." He was interrupted as Angel wandered over from the corner. Angel, a lithe young man with a mop of pale hair and an almost ethereal, apathetic look, had indeed isolated himself at the edge of the room earlier, half dozing in a chair by the wall. Now, drawn by curiosity or boredom, he joined the small cluster. "I suspect we're about to get very busy, very fast," Angel finished Madoka's thought with a languid sigh. He rolled his shoulders as if already feeling the ache of the work to come. They wouldn't drag me back from a rather lovely African sunset if it wasn't urgent. He plopped down into an empty chair, draping one arm over the back. His expression was hard to read. He looked half asleep, but those who knew Angel understood that was when he was often most perceptive. Kobani bit her lip and spoke up again, voice barely above a whisper. This recall. It's because of the traitors, isn't it? The ones who betrayed us during the lab incident. She glanced around nervously. Tokyo must be in danger. At the mention of betrayal, a ripple of grim understanding passed through the group. They all remembered the report they recently got, the coordinated attack a month ago, the theft of every valuable Pokémon and piece of research from their secure lab in Hokkaido, pulled off by insiders they had trusted. That single event had shattered their ranks. Aki's jaw clenched at Kobani's words. If those bastards are operating in Tokyo, he muttered, then Makama's likely preparing a counterattack. A thorough one. We should have expected it, Angel said flatly, eyes half-lidded. Rotten branches close to the root. Tokyo's the root. He let out a slow breath, perhaps already steeling himself for a grind of days with little sleep. Himeno exhaled a stream of air as if it were smoke, slipping her unlit cigarette back into its case. Well, whatever the case, I'm just glad we're all in one piece. She offered a faint smile to the others. Hell of a homecoming, isn't it? At least we get to see each other's lovely faces again. Denji chuckled, nudging Power. Yeah. I mean, I didn't think I'd miss you all, but maybe I kinda did. Power huffed, tossing her hair. Speak for yourself, dumbass. I thrived on my own. But, she added in a quieter mumble, this place is less boring with all of you around. A few of them smiled at that. Even Kobani managed a weak laugh, wiping her eyes quickly with her sleeve, whether those were tears of relief or anxiety, perhaps even she didn't know. Ere, who had been silently listening from beside Kobani, adjusted his round glasses nervously. Hirokazu Ere was among the younger agents, and he still carried himself with a bit of rookie self-consciousness. After months alone in the field, being back with his team felt almost overwhelming. An all-hands meeting of just us, off the official record. It means Makama doesn't want anyone else to even know what we discuss. Madoka cast a glance at Ere, an approving look in his eyes. Exactly. We should be prepared for a sort of war council. Off book. Aki uncrossed his arms and nodded firmly. Then let's get ready for that. Remember, we trust only each other now. His gaze fell particularly on Denji and Power, wordlessly urging them to settle down. Then Aki himself drew a steadying breath, as if donning an invisible mask of professionalism. It had been a long time since all of them were in one room, and it stirred something in him, a mix of determination and a quiet relief. Before anyone could add more, the heavy door at the back of the hall hissed and began to swing inward. Conversation died immediately. Denji straightened so fast he nearly fell out of his chair again. Power hopped off the back of her seat to land on her feet. Kobani froze mid-fidget. All eyes snapped to the doorway. In stepped a tall young man with silver grey hair and striking ice-blue eyes. He wore a crisp black tactical suit, the kind that could pass for an office suit or conceal body armor underneath, and he carried himself with a relaxed, almost breezy confidence. He was clean-shaven, youthful, and would have looked like a fresh-faced recruit if not for the aura of quiet authority and razor-sharp alertness that radiated from him. As he moved further into the room, the light revealed a faint diagonal scar across his chin, one of the very few marks on an otherwise unblemished face. Those who hadn't met him in person instantly knew who he was. The legend among them. Hiroshi Elusive Fox Kobayashi had arrived, and with him came a palpable shift in the air from anxious silence to anticipation. Chapter 26, Tokyo Purge, 3. Aki unconsciously straightened to attention. Kishive uncrossed his arms, regarding Hiroshi with a curious gaze, as if appraising how the kid had grown. Himeno stood up from the wall, and a subtle smile touched her lips. Kobani's eyes widened, she whispered in awe, "That's him," to Ere, who nodded quickly. Denji and Power leaned forward, openly staring with unabashed curiosity. Angel cracked one eye fully open. Madoka closed his laptop, giving Hiroji his full focus. Hiroji paused at the head of the room and swept a gaze over the assembled agents, his team now. He saw exhaustion in their faces, cuts and bruises from battle, weariness, and hope all at once. He also saw friends, some old, some new, gathered in what might be the only truly safe room left in Tokyo. For a heartbeat, emotion swelled in his chest, pride at what each of them had accomplished, relief that they'd made it home alive, and a heavy sense of responsibility for what was to come. But Hiroji was a master of appearances. He pushed down the weight in his heart and donned an easy grin. "Why does everyone look like they're at a funeral?" he asked, voice warm and jovial as he spread his hands in greeting. "Lighten up, folks, last I checked, we saved the world." He arched an eyebrow playfully. "Or at least, we saved a lot of it." A few chuckles answered him, tension easing by a fraction. Hiroji stepped further in, nodding affably to individuals as he passed. When he reached Aki, who was standing almost at attention, Hiroji clapped him on the shoulder. "Good to see you, Aki." Aki relaxed slightly and nodded back. "Sir? Sir?" "Oof, none of that," Hiroji laughed. "I've been an assistant director for 5 minutes and already getting called sir." He turned to address the room, his grin widening. "That's right, in case you hadn't heard, I somehow went straight from solo spy to assistant director. Talk about a career jump, hey!" Denji's eyes lit up with recognition and surprise. "So it's true. They really made you the new assistant director," he blurted out, unfiltered as always. Hiroji shot him a finger gun gesture of confirmation. "Guilty as charged, Denji." The ripple of laughter that spread this time was genuine. "Damn, they move fast," Kishive remarked with a smirk. "I remember when you were still wet behind the ears. And now he outranks you, old man," Himeno teased Kishive, winking at Hiroshi. Hiroshi chuckled, then put on a mock stern face, planting his hands on his hips. "Indeed. All of you, be warned, I plan to abuse my new powers mercilessly." He dramatically cleared his throat, imitating a pompous bureaucrat. "First order of business, paperwork. Look, Aki," he swiveled to face Aki, fighting back a smile, "I'm going to dump all the paperwork on you." Aki blinked, then let out something almost like a laugh, a rare sound from him. The absurdity of the statement, paired with Hiroji's faux authoritarian tone, caught him off guard. "Please don't," he replied dryly, playing along. "I think I've had enough paperwork for one lifetime, sir." "You sure?" Hiroji quipped, crossing his arms in an exaggerated thoughtful pose. "I have a lovely 700-page after-action report from my Shanghai OP that needs filing. I'll even let you color-code it." Aki made a face as if he might be sick. "On second thought, assign it to Denji. He could use the practice," he countered, his lips curving in a rare smirk. "Hey!" Denji protested, to another round of light laughter. Hiroji laughed the loudest, raising his palms in surrender. All right, no extra paperwork. I promise." He gave Aki a subtle nod, an unspoken thanks for playing along. For just a moment, their eyes met, and Aki noticed a flicker in Hiroji's blue gaze, a flicker of genuine anxiety beneath the mirth. Hiroji's eyes betrayed him for only a heartbeat. He glanced around the familiar concrete walls and the faces of his comrades, and an old unease seemed to pass over him like a shadow. Aki recognized it. He had seen that exact look in the mirror after returning from a deadly mission, the look of someone who is happy to be home, yet fearful of what home has become. He's nervous about being back in Tokyo, Aki realized. He's covering it with jokes. With a quiet voice only Hiroji could hear, Aki said, "It's good to have you back." Tokyo hasn't been the same, and neither have we. There was understanding in Aki's eyes, a reassurance that whatever haunted Hiroji here, he wasn't alone in facing it. Hiroji's posture eased at that, and he gave Aki a grateful, almost imperceptible smile. "It's good to be back," he replied softly. "Especially with all of you here." To break the moment before it grew heavy, Hiroji turned his attention to two agents who were practically vibrating with curiosity. Denji and Power had inched closer, staring at Hiroji like he was a mythical creature come to life. Hiroji decided to have a little fun with them. "So," he said, clapping once, "I hear some of you caused a few messy situations out there." He pretended to scrutinize the room, then zeroed in on the obvious culprits with a playful glare. "Denji. Power. Would you two know anything about that?" Power immediately pointed at Denji. "It was him," she proclaimed, chin jutting forward defiantly. "He failed to capture some lowly grunts and they blew up a bridge in his face." "Pathetic, really?" Denji's jaw dropped. "What, you're the one who leveled an entire building in Rabat just 'cause," he retorted, turning red. Power tossed her hair haughtily. "That building was clearly in league with the enemy. I did what was necessary." Hiroji raised a hand, chuckling. "Relax, I already got the reports. Let's see." He tapped his chin as if recalling from memory. "Denji chased smugglers through a jungle, fought an arbok barehanded, and blew up a bridge." Denji scratched the back of his head, looking both proud and embarrassed as a few colleagues gave him thumbs ups or pats on the back. Hiroji then looked at Power. "Power incited a firefight in a desert stronghold, defeated a militia and did level a building or two in the process." "It was only one building," Power interjected, puffing her cheeks. Hiroji laughed. "Only one, she says. Good to know." He put on a mock stern face again. "Clearly, you two have some excess energy to burn. I think the solution is obvious, double training sessions for both of you." He wagged his finger as though scolding misbehaving children. "Maybe even triple. Can't have you making Tokyo into Swiss cheese when we hit the ground running." Denji's face fell into comedic horror. "Double training? Ah, come on," he groaned, slumping. "I already run 10k every morning and do 500 push ups. Which you skip half the time," Aki chimed in, unable to resist needling him. Denji shot Aki a betrayed look. "Traitor! Don't give him ideas." Meanwhile, Power cackled at Denji's misery. "Yes, punish him. Make him strong so I have a proper rival to crush." She thumped her chest, then paused as Hiroji's words sank in. "Wait, both of us?" "Oh yes." Hiroji gave her a mirthless grin of pure boss energy. "You too, Power. You blow it up, you buy it. Or in this case, train for it." Power's mouth hung open in exaggerated shock. She stomped one foot on her chair. "This is oppression. I am perfect as I am," she declared, drawing laughs. "I need no extra training, only battle." "Well, battles are coming," Hiroji assured her, "and I need you in top shape for them. So humor me on the training, will you? Both of you." He pointed between Denji and Power, who each mumbled something that might have been agreement, though Power's sounded suspiciously like "I'll train when pigs fly." The others watched with amusement at the exchange. Chapter 27, Tokyo Purge, 4. Angel, who had been silent, gave a half-smile. "If they double their training, maybe I can get out of mine," he drawled lazily. "Nice try, Angel," Hiroji shot back, smirking. "Nobody escapes morning drills. Not even you." Angel sighed dramatically and sank deeper into his chair as if mortally wounded, earning a few chuckles. A soft laugh came from Himeno's direction. She stepped forward, eyeing Hiroji with a playful glint. "So this is the infamous elusive fox in the flesh," she mused aloud, loud enough for all to hear. She gave an exaggerated once-over from Hiroji's polished shoes to his silver hair. Gotta say, I expected someone older. Scarred. Maybe with an eye patch and a villainous mustache. Hiroji chuckled at that, raising an eyebrow. I can grow a mustache if it helps morale, he offered lightly. Maybe add a scar or two. Oh no, you're perfect as you are. Kobani blurted out, then instantly turned crimson as all eyes shifted to her. She slapped both hands over her mouth. I mean not perfect, I just. Mortified, she slid down in her seat, wishing she could disappear. Laughter rippled through the group, gentle and good-natured. Even Hiroji had to bite back a grin at Kobani's unintended compliment. Himeno chuckled and came to Kobani's rescue. Relax, Kobani, we're all thinking it, she teased, giving the younger girl a friendly elbow. He is much more charming than we thought our legendary spy would be. Several agents nodded or murmured agreement. Ere, cheeks a bit pink, adjusted his glasses hurriedly. It's true. We've all heard so much about the great fox who never shows his real face, he said, earnest and a touch odd. I didn't expect our hero to be a silver-haired youngster with a movie star smile. Hiroji felt a tiny flash of heat in his own face now. He rubbed the back of his neck, feigning embarrassment. All right. I suppose I should apologize for not being a grizzled old man, he joked. I can start chain-smoking cigars and scowling if it'll make you all more comfortable. Kishive barked a laugh at that. Don't you dare, kid. One Kishive is enough, he said, referring to himself. The older man gave Hiroji an approving nod. Truth be told, I met Hiroji once when he was a kid. He had a face too innocent for this line of work, probably what makes him so damned good at it. Kishive's gravelly voice carried a rare respect. Don't let the baby face fool you. He can literally impersonate anyone with his creepy realistic latex masks. The fox bites hard. There was a collective murmur of assent. Hiroji dipped his head humbly. I had good mentors, he replied, meeting Kishive's scarred gaze gratefully, then glancing toward Aki, Himeno, and finally Madoka and Yoshimura's empty chairs at the very front. And I've heard a lot about each of you these past months. Honestly, I'm the one who's impressed. He began to pace slowly, catching each agent's eye in turn as he spoke. Hayakawa taking down that Eastern European lab with barely any backup? That was one for the textbooks. Aki, ever modest, simply responded, just doing my job. But, thank you. The praise made him stand a bit straighter. Himeno, Hiroji continued, infiltrating a high society party and stealing intel right under the target's nose? Brilliant. I hope you charged Dr. Schneider extra for the pleasure of your company before you picked his pockets. Himeno laughed, pretending to toss back her hair glamorously. Oh, he paid plenty, he just didn't know it. I'll give you some tips later, if you want. I might take you up on that. Hiroji winked, then turned to Kobani. Kobani, I read about your work in that jungle. You stayed alone in deep cover for days gathering intel on traffickers. That takes nerves of steel. Kobani's eyes went wide at the compliment. My nerves were more like jelly, to be honest, she stammered. I was so scared the entire time. But you did it anyway, Hiroji finished kindly. Bravery isn't not being scared, it's doing what you have to even when you are. You showed real bravery. Kobani's face flushed, but this time it was with shy pride as she ducked her head, a small smile on her lips. Hiroji's gaze shifted to Madoka. Madoka, you unraveled an international intel web and liaised with the Americans without sleep, from what I hear. Outstanding work. We might not have half our leads if not for your analysis. Madoka gave a faint, tired smile. Just thorough research, Assistant Director. I'm glad it helped. Behind his glasses, relief that his painstaking desk work was seen and valued. Next was Ere. Hirokazu Ere, you managed surveillance on dangerous people completely on your own. Got key evidence too. That's impressive for someone barely out of training. Ere looked startled that Hiroshi even knew his first name. He straightened, pushing up his glasses. I still have a lot to learn, he said earnestly. But thank you. I won't let the team down. Kobani patted his arm supportively. Hiroshi then made a show of squinting around. Has anyone seen a surly man with white hair and an eye patch? Grumbles about kids these days. Ah, there you are, Kishive. He snapped his fingers, as if just noticing the older man. Everyone chuckled. Seriously, though Kishive, thank you for keeping these maniacs, he gestured broadly at Denji and Power, alive and relatively in line during training. We owe you. Kishive shrugged, scratching the scar on his cheek. They've got guts. I just hammered some technique into M. You've got yourself a solid squad of misfits here, assistant director. Don't screw it up, he added, the corner of his mouth lifting in half a grin. Hiroshi gave a mock salute. I'll do my best not to. Finally, he looked to Angel, who sat with his arms now folded, eyes closed again as if napping through the meeting. And Angel, nice work in Central Africa. I read your debrief, neutralizing that arms deal with minimal fuss, elegant as always. Angel lazily opened one eye. Thanks. It was nothing special, he replied flatly. But a tiny pleased smile ghosted across his lips. Glad someone noticed though. I notice everything, Hiroshi said in a playful ominous tone, waggling his fingers spookily. Angel actually snorted, and a couple laughs broke out in surprise. Making Angel laugh was no small feat. The room's atmosphere had transformed in minutes. What began as taut uncertainty was now warm with camaraderie and the buzz of reunited friends. Hiroshi felt it clearly, the relief, the admiration, the collective strength, and it buoyed him. If anyone could do what was about to be asked of them, it was this ragtag group of eccentric, brave fools. Suddenly, a new presence filled the doorway, commanding, quiet, instantly sobering. Chapter 28, Tokyo Purge, v. Makima stepped into the hall, heels clicking softly on the polished concrete floor. Beside her loomed Yoshimura, the silver-haired elder statesman of PSIA. At once, every agent in the room went still and straight as if pulled by an unseen string. Conversation ceased, laughter died on lips. Denji nearly tripped over himself standing at attention. Power, who normally balked at authority, straightened reflexively. Kobani jumped to her feet so fast her chair scraped loudly. The wave of respect, and perhaps a touch of awe, was palpable. Makima surveyed the room with cool amber brown eyes, and those eyes missed nothing. She noted the faint smiles lingering on faces, the slightly eased posture of agents who moments ago had been wound tight. Her gaze flickered to Hiroshi for the briefest moment, and there was a hint of approval in them, as if acknowledging the morale boost he'd orchestrated. Then she stepped forward, Yoshimura just a pace behind, and addressed the assembly. At ease, Makima said calmly, her voice cutting through the silence. A collective breath seemed to release as agents moved from rigid postures to a more relaxed stance, though the tension of anticipation remained. Makima walked to the front of the room and stood beside Hiroshi. Yoshimura came to her other side, giving the group a benevolent smile and a nod of greeting. Makima was dressed as impeccably as ever, a charcoal grey suit tailored to perfection, paired with a crisp white shirt and a subtle black tie. Her auburn hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, not a strand out of place. Despite the youthfulness of her face, she exuded an aura of authority so potent it was almost tangible. Where Hiroshi's presence warmed the room, Makima's electrified it, demanding focus. Firstly, Makima began, her tone measured and clear, "Welcome home. Each of you performed exceptionally during Operation Homecoming and the missions leading up to it. You have my deepest gratitude for your hard work and sacrifices abroad." She inclined her head slightly, a gesture of respect from a superior to her troops, and it was not lost on them. Many in the room, Aki included, felt a swell of pride at her words. Makama's eyes softened just a fraction as she looked from face to face. It's a rare pleasure to see all of you in one place. You've all grown, stronger. For just a heartbeat, her gaze lingered on Denji, on Power, on Kobani, and Ere, the children of the group. There might have been a flicker of relief in her eyes that they were alive and whole. Then the moment passed, and the steel returned to her expression. She took a breath. Unfortunately, we have little time for pleasantries. We face a crisis here at home that eclipses any threat we encountered abroad. Her next words dropped like stones in a pond. The Public Security Intelligence Agency is rotten to the core. A stunned hush fell. Even though many had suspected as much, hearing it stated so bluntly by Makama herself was jarring. Glances were exchanged, Kishive's brow furrowed deeply, and he muttered a quiet curse under his breath. Kobani's hand flew to cover her mouth in dismay. Aki's eyes narrowed, anger and concern tightening his features. Denji and Power looked outright confused. Rotten to the core? What did that mean exactly? Angel's head tilted, his lazy posture stiffening slightly as he realized the gravity of those words. Makama continued, voice crisp and unflinching. Over the past year, we have uncovered evidence of severe corruption and infiltration across our agency and beyond. To put it plainly, our organization has been compromised from within, at almost every level, in almost every region. Behind her, as if on cue, the projector screen lit up with a map of Japan. Red dots and circles appeared, highlighting regions and prefectures in a grim pattern. Kanto, Makama said, indicating Tokyo and the surrounding area which glowed red. Hokkaido. I wait. Niigata. Saitama. Chiba. Kanagawa. Shizuoka. Nagano. Ishikawa. Kyoto. Hyogo. Okayama. Kumamoto. Okinawa. With each name she listed, another region on the map turned red. Gasps and low murmurs rippled through the crowd. It was nearly the entire country. Hiroshi felt a chill as he watched region after region light up. He had known it was bad. Makama had given him an overview in private, but seeing it laid out so starkly made his stomach drop. He glanced at Yoshimura. The old man's face was grave, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes full of sorrow at the state of the agency he'd once helped build. Yoshimura folded his hands behind his back, his silence reinforcing Makama's words. This is the scale of the rot, Makama said. No branch is untouched. Some are overrun. Her voice never wavered, but the disgust in her tone was evident. Our enemies have embedded themselves deeply into PSIA's regional offices, into local police forces, into regulatory bureaus everywhere. Denji leaned toward Power and whispered loudly, that's like half the map. Power, unusually serious, whispered back, more than half, you fool. Himeno's heart sank at the long list of red zones. She instinctively reached for Aki's hand and gave it a squeeze. Aki squeezed back, jaw tight. He'd traveled through some of those places in the past, he'd even trusted colleagues from those branches. Traitors among us, in every city. It was a bitter pill. Chapter 29, Tokyo Purge, 6. Makama pressed a button on a remote in her hand. The illuminated map vanished, replaced instantly by a slideshow, a grim collage of faces and clandestine meetings, surveillance photos taken from awkward angles, images blurry yet unmistakably damning. Grainy black and white snapshots depicted influential men in tailored suits shaking hands furtively with shadowy figures hidden behind sunglasses and baseball caps. Each slide bore annotations, names, dates, transactions. There were even excerpts of intercepted messages, displaying the arrogant confidence with which these figures operated. We have identified dozens of prominent politicians, Makama continued steadily, her voice carrying the weight of barely contained disgust, who have been bought outright by foreign intelligence agencies and domestic crime syndicates. She paused as the next image appeared, a clear, damning shot of a respected parliament member accepting a thick envelope from an identified Russian GRU operative in a secluded cafe. Another showed a high-ranking prefectural governor sharing a quiet dinner with a notorious Yakuza boss known for illegal Pokémon trafficking. These figures range from local council members to sitting cabinet ministers. The rot runs high and deep. She clicked again, and an official portrait appeared, a dignified older man with silver hair, gentle eyes behind rimless glasses, the official image used when announcing state funerals. A somber silence settled over the room. The former Prime Minister Hisashi Ikeda died suddenly 3 months ago. Officially declared a heart attack, Makima stated, allowing the gravity of the revelation to hang heavily in the air before continuing, her voice hardening with cold fury. Unofficially, the timing was far too convenient. PM Ikeda was openly opposed to recent security concessions demanded by foreign governments, particularly concerning our national Pokémon research and intelligence sharing protocols. He became an obstacle they needed removed. Madoka's sharp, analytical eyes narrowed behind his glasses as he leaned forward slightly. He had spent countless nights at the Japanese embassy in Washington, sifting through intelligence that hinted at just such sinister machinations. Seeing the confirmation now, his heart beat faster, vindication mingling unpleasantly with dread. Carefully, deliberately, he raised a hand to adjust his glasses and spoke quietly, asking the question that gnawed at him. "And what about his successor, Prime Minister Tanaka?" Madoka asked, his voice careful but firm. "He stepped down suddenly right after the general director defected. Was there foul play there as well?" Makima's amber gaze flicked to Madoka, her lips pressing into a thin line. The room seemed to hold its breath, sensing the heaviness of her impending revelation. "Yes," she replied bluntly, her voice low and tight. Tanaka-san's resignation was not as voluntary as it seemed. When the general director vanished along with the sanctioned Black Ops team and most of our Pokémon assets, Tanaka became the scapegoat. The cabinet half-compromised themselves declared his inability to maintain security as gross incompetence. Privately, however, it's widely suspected that blackmail and threats played a role in forcing him out. She clicked to another slide, revealing Tanaka's resignation press conference, his face pale, eyes hollowed by exhaustion and fear. He resigned after barely 2 months. Now we have a third prime minister in a single term, PM Takahashi. He's an honest man, as far as we can tell, but politically inexperienced and severely isolated. He took office amidst bribery scandals and threats of internal blackmail. Some of his own party members are actively sabotaging him, colluding with foreign powers and criminal elements to undermine Japan's government from within. Makima's voice darkened further, carrying deep frustration as she articulated the scale of the political turmoil. Japan's government has effectively become a revolving door. 3 prime ministers within 1 term. Our international reputation has cratered. We've become an object of ridicule no better than the United Kingdom in recent years. Our closest allies don't trust our stability, our enemies see weakness and are circling like vultures, and every corrupt actor thinks they can buy us off or threaten us into submission. A tangible wave of anger surged through the gathered agents. Himeno, always composed and poised, clenched her fists so hard her knuckles whitened. Her normally steady voice trembled with barely suppressed fury. "Those absolute bastards," she hissed under her breath, echoing the sentiment felt deeply by all of them. The thought that their nation's leaders could be bought, blackmailed, or even murdered made her blood run hot. Her hand unconsciously moved to the edge of her black eye patch, fingers tracing the fabric, an old habit born of anxiety and anger. Beside her, Aki's jaw tightened visibly, his own gaze hardening into icy resolve. Denji's fist clenched on the table as he muttered something about wanting to personally throw corrupt politicians through windows. Makima allowed the tension to simmer for a moment before continuing, her voice becoming even sharper, the quiet fury behind her words unmistakable. "And it gets worse," she said, her ember eyes piercing the gathered agents with a chilling intensity. "Our enemies aren't satisfied merely toppling governments or manipulating politics. They're accelerating efforts to infiltrate deep into our intelligence networks. Their objective is absolute control, not influence, not espionage, but complete, direct dominion over Japan's entire national security apparatus. A collective breath seemed to catch around the room. Eyes widened, faces paled. Aki's jaw tightened, Kishive narrowed his gaze, and even Angel shifted slightly, clearly troubled. Makama's eyes flicked briefly to Hiroshi, a moment of silent, heavy understanding passing between them. She continued, they possess inside information agents embedded within PSIA itself, police departments, even the self-defense forces. Our adversaries have been systematically working to compromise every facet of Japan's security. Every single one of you, except Hiroshi, was compromised at some level. They had full dossiers on your identities, movements, even your psychological profiles. Hiroshi was the only exception due to the extreme security precautions around his recruitment and operations: latex masks, voice modulation, constant disguise shifts. They were essentially setting a trap for every PSIA operative, especially those of us involved in dismantling Ringmaster and acquiring their technology. Chapter 30, Tokyo Purge-7. A murmur of shock and unease rippled through the agents. Aki cursed under his breath, realizing just how vulnerable they had been. Kobani trembled visibly, terror flickering in her eyes at how close they'd come to total annihilation. Himeno's lips tightened around her cigarette, her eye darkening in grim realization. Makama advanced the briefing, her voice ice cold as images flashed across the projection screen: clandestine photographs captured from recent covert operations. A filthy, dimly lit laboratory with twisted machinery, scattered syringes, blood-stained operating tables, and incubators filled with murky, glowing liquids. Next, crates stacked high with smuggled weapons, rifles, explosives, and strange metallic devices designed specifically for Pokémon containment or exploitation. We face threats on multiple fronts, Makama continued relentlessly. Inside our borders, illegal Pokémon laboratories have proliferated secret facilities conducting unlicensed and horrific experiments. Pokémon are being dissected alive, genetically modified, forced into agonizing and twisted evolutions. There are even attempts at fusing Pokémon genetics with human subjects to create living weapons, projects that make the horrors we've seen before look mild in comparison. The screen shifted again to show black market stalls hidden in dark alleyways, shelves lined with Pokeball prototypes, vials labeled with Pokémon DNA, jars of Pokémon organs harvested for profit. Denji's eyes narrowed in disgust, Power audibly snarled, clenching her fists. Makama's voice lowered further, a razor's edge of anger now fully evident. These same black markets are supplying extremists who've infiltrated our country: radical Islamist groups such as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and various fundamentalist splinter factions. We have confirmed intelligence that these terrorists are planning major attacks inside Japan. They've already smuggled agents onto Japanese soil, embedding themselves within immigrant communities and exploiting our nation's reluctance to scrutinize foreigners. She took a deep breath, her expression turning darker. Japan, a non-Islamic, largely secular society, represents an ideal target for these radical Islamist cells. They seek to exploit our political chaos, aiming specifically at densely populated civilian targets: schools, shopping centers, train stations, areas with maximum casualties. Their goal is nothing less than mass slaughter and total societal collapse. Historical precedents show they aim to kill the men, enslave women and children, forcibly convert survivors to Islam, and erase our unique cultural identity and traditions entirely. Pokémon, being easily concealed in miniaturized Pokeballs, provide them with ideal portable weapons for acts of mass terror. A stunned silence blanketed the room. The sheer horror of Makama's words hung heavily, forcing each agent to confront this grim reality. Even Angel's normally aloof expression tightened visibly, disgust flickering across his delicate features. Kishive's scarred face was an unreadable mask of simmering fury. Kobani let out a faint, horrified gasp, her trembling hands rising to her lips. Pokémon, used as weapons of terror, she whispered, voice shaking. Against innocent people. Makima nodded gravely. Precisely. Picture a Voltorb or electrode detonating inside a packed subway station at rush hour, a Charmander or Charmeleon unleashed to burn buildings crowded with families and children, psychic types manipulated into inducing mass panic, suicides, or riots. The devastation would be catastrophic, instantaneous, and widespread. She tapped the projector screen again, and intercepted chatter filled the speaker's scratchy, distorted voices speaking Arabic, chillingly matter-of-fact as they discussed targeting schools, hospitals, and shrines. One voice laughed cruelly about turning the infidels' own creatures into weapons against them, while another coldly mentioned targeting places where women and children gathered, aiming to maximize emotional impact and terror. Explicit instructions spoke of kidnapping young women as war brides, capturing children to indoctrinate as future soldiers, slaughtering male captives publicly to instill fear. Kobani visibly shuddered, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Himeno gently placed a reassuring hand on her trembling shoulder, her own face pale but set with furious resolve. Denji clenched his fists until they shook. Power's crimson eyes blazed openly with rage, and even Aki's usually composed demeanor cracked, teeth gritted as he fought back raw anger. Makima paused to let the horror fully sink in before continuing. Her voice trembled slightly, barely controlled anger lacing every syllable. These threats aren't abstract or theoretical. They're already operational, coordinating closely with corrupt elements inside our government. These traitors, politicians, officials, even some within the PSIA itself are directly enabling terrorists who openly advocate for mass violence, cultural erasure, and the forced subjugation of our people. Their goal is nothing short of destroying Japan's way of life, imposing their twisted ideology by any means necessary. Our culture, history, language, all of it would be reduced to ashes, replaced by violence and terror. Aki finally spoke, his voice low and shaking with suppressed fury. We can't let that happen. Not now, not ever. Makima's expression hardened further. She clicked again, and now came truly disturbing images, X-ray-like scans and medical diagrams showing human silhouettes with foreign, inhuman shapes fused to them, a photograph of a dimly lit operating table spattered with blood, a close-up of a child's arm marked with a serial number tattoo and what looked like a faintly glowing vein beneath the skin. Perhaps worst of all, she intoned, letting the horror of the visuals sink in, there are ongoing research projects attempting to create Pokémon human hybrids. In plain terms, to fuse or genetically engineer living weapons. Chapter 31, Tokyo Purge, 8. A sharp intake of breath was heard across the room. Kobani made a soft, horrified squeak and grabbed Are's sleeve. Are himself felt his stomach churn. It was one thing reading hints of this in stolen documents, another to see even a hint of the reality. Denji's eyes went huge. They're trying to make, what, like Pokémon people, he blurted, unable to contain his shock. The idea was so fantastical and grotesque that it almost didn't register. Angel frowned, his usual apathy cracking to reveal disgust beneath. TCH trying to play God, how original, he muttered, recalling war zonies where he'd seen human cruelty in many forms. This might top them all. Hiroshi's fists clenched at his sides as the images scrolled. He recognized one as a screenshot from Daisy's memory of the Shanghai lab, and other labs, a worm ringmaster left behind. He briefly looked at his own deep scars on his arm, healed and covered by skin graft, but still visible. It took conscious effort for him to relax his hands. Makima was revealing everything now to the group, nothing held back. The mood in the room had shifted to somber outrage. Makima glanced around, carefully reading each agent's reaction. Her voice dropped a register, becoming heavier, colder, bearing a weight that pressed down on everyone in the room. This is what we're truly facing, she said, pausing briefly to let the grim truth settle. These aren't just localized crimes, these are stains on the very soul of our nation. And yet, the situation is even darker. She clicked the remote again, and the projector screen changed. Harsh images filled the room, surveillance photos of international terrorists, extremist propaganda featuring Pokémon, crates of smuggled weapons labeled with foreign alphabets. Each slide seemed to sap oxygen from the room. Make no mistake, we are far behind in a biological arms race that began 15 years ago, Makima stated, her voice quiet yet razor-sharp. As you know, Ringmaster introduced the first biotech device capable of synthesizing new life forms by combining DNA sequences. With this device, one could theoretically recreate or engineer an organism by brute-forcing genome combinations trillions upon quadrillions of possibilities. Imagine, a device so powerful it could generate life from raw genetic data alone. Initially, countries around the world paid astronomical sums for access to this groundbreaking machine. She paused, letting the enormity of this sink in. Everyone's eyes remained glued to her, their expressions ranging from horrified fascination to quiet dread. For 2 frantic years, every major nation desperately raced to weaponize this technology. Each country tried brute-forcing genomes, hoping to create biological weapons. Yet every single attempt ended in catastrophic failure. The computational power required was astronomical, and the biological complexity simply too great. Instead of new species, they created monstrosities, twisted abominations that could barely survive birth. Each experiment ended in disaster. The global community realized the dream of bioengineering weapons was a dangerous, costly fantasy. She clicked forward, her voice steady but grim. Then, when hope had nearly faded, Ringmaster out of nowhere revealed the world's first fully engineered organism. They didn't brute force it, they simply provided a complete genome sequence, one impossibly detailed, something that would have taken humanity thousands of years to decode using brute force. They called this creature the first Pokémon, naming it a completely new biological category. The first specimen Ringmaster revealed to the world was designated Piku. Denji muttered incredulously, "Wait, they created Pokémon out of thin air? Just like that?" Makima nodded. Exactly. Pokémon did not exist before this. No one had even considered creatures with these abilities possible. Ringmaster changed the rules of biology overnight. Pokémon were new, unprecedented organisms, living weapons, powerful companions, beings with extraordinary potential. And Ringmaster sold the device and its technology to every major country, at exorbitant prices, igniting a global scramble to replicate and control Pokémon. She paused, meeting Hiroshi's eyes briefly before continuing. Japan received our device 15 years ago, the same as every major nation. But during the recent betrayal, the same betrayal that emptied our Kanto lab, the Director General himself destroyed Japan's only biotech device, rendering us unable to produce new Pokémon at scale. Even worse, Ringmaster is no longer selling these devices. Their entire original leadership was wiped out during Hiroshi's operations in Iraq. The new Ringmaster command structure is weak, disorganized, oblivious to their own assets. Other nations still possess their original devices or have managed to reverse engineer replicas. Japan is dangerously behind. Kishive exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. So, you're saying, we have nothing left? No means of creating or sustaining our own Pokémon population. And every other country does. Makima shook her head slightly, a rare flicker of pride crossing her usually stoic expression. We would be in exactly that situation if not for Hiroshi's efforts. She turned to Hiroshi, who stood quietly at her side, and nodded for him to take over. Hiroshi stepped forward, meeting the team's eyes one by one, his tone calm and resolute. During my infiltration missions abroad, I managed to secure critical intelligence including the original blueprints for Ringmaster's Pokémon biotech device. A low murmur rippled through the room, shock and awe flickering across faces. Hiroshi held up a hand, continuing firmly, specifically, in Moscow, I infiltrated the Russian government's most secure facility and recovered the complete schematics right under their noses. Without that, we'd have been permanently locked out of the Pokémon race. Denji's eyes went wide, mouth hanging open. You broke into the Kremlin or something? Hiroshi allowed himself a tiny smile. Something like that. Power punched the air triumphantly. Magnificent. Truly worthy of Power's praise. Even Aki, usually reserved, shook his head in quiet astonishment, a newfound respect gleaming in his eyes. Makima resumed smoothly, building off Hiroshi's revelation. This means, for Japan, the Pokémon arms race is not entirely lost thanks solely to Hiroshi's bravery and skill. But we are still at a severe disadvantage. Other nations have had years of Pokémon development. Russia, China, America, Europe all have thriving Pokémon programs, laboratories, even military-grade teams of trained Pokémon operatives. Japan has been stalled, weakened, betrayed from within. Chapter 32, Tokyo Purge, 9. She advanced the screen again. This time it showed an organizational chart of PSIA and police, with red X's and question marks on many positions. Finally and most critically we must address the enemy within. Internal traitors. We know for a fact that moles and double agents are embedded in our intelligence agency, in law enforcement, even in the bureaucratic offices that oversee security policy. Some were part of the lab heist conspiracy, others are newly turned or recruited. At this, a heavy silence fell. Seeing the chart, with so many unknowns and possible traitors, hammered home why they alone were gathered here. Trust had become a rare commodity. Makima's gaze was like a blade as she swept it over the room. That is why you are all here, in secret. As of now, I trust no one outside of this room. She let that sink in. The agents absorbed the declaration, they were at the last line, the only ones above suspicion. Denji exhaled slowly. Even he grasped the severity in Makima's tone. No pressure, hey, he mumbled, attempting a shaky grin towards Power. Power gave him a toothy smirk and cracked her knuckles, trying to act fearless, though a bead of sweat betrayed her nervousness. In truth, many of them felt a mix of pride and dread. Pride that Makima believed in them, dread at the enormity of being the only ones. Makima's expression softened just enough to not be entirely foreboding. I know this is a lot of information. But you deserve to hear the full scope directly. She clicked the remote once more. Now the screen displayed a simple bullet point list titled Objectives and Resources, but the details were blurred out to anyone without clearance. It was more symbolic than informative for them at the moment. She stepped aside slightly and extended her hand towards Hiroshi, almost like a ceremonial gesture. As of this moment, command of all daily field operations is being transferred to Assistant Director Hiroshi Kobayashi. Hiroshi, who had been standing to Makima's side, straightened in surprise. They had discussed this privately, but hearing it formally declared gave him a jolt of adrenaline. 50 or so pairs of eyes shifted to him, and he felt their weight. Makima continued, her tone brooking no argument, Hiroshi will lead the fight on the ground. He has the most comprehensive understanding of our enemy's tactics from his years abroad. He also holds invaluable knowledge data on 56 different Pokémon species and associated technologies that he personally gathered during his global missions. That is more than any nation on Earth possesses, even the United States. She allowed herself a small, proud smile in Hiroshi's direction. Hiroshi's work has given Japan a fighting chance in what's to come. Now he will direct that fight here at home. Many heads nodded. Ere looked particularly impressed. 56 species. The enormity of that research dawned anew on him and others who hadn't known the exact number. Denji whispered to Power, I didn't even know there were that many Pokémon. Power shrugged as if unimpressed, but her eyes were wide. Kishive murmured, the kid's been busy, with a touch of admiration. Himeno flashed Hiroshi a supportive smile. Aki placed a hand briefly on Hiroshi's back in a gesture of solidarity. Hiroshi himself inclined his head to Makima, accepting the responsibility with a calm he did not entirely feel. Inside, his mind raced, this is it. It's real. But outwardly he met the eyes of his peers with steady resolve. Makima wasn't finished. I will remain in charge of high-level strategy and political coordination, she said. I'll handle the Prime Minister, the intelligence directors, those few we believe we can trust, and manage our overall policy approach. Consider me your shield against any bureaucratic interference. I'll be fighting that battle so you don't have to. There was a fierce confidence in her voice that reassured them. Makima was nothing if not adept at controlling a situation, whether by politics or other means. Yoshimura stepped forward at this juncture, his hands resting on his cane. Though he hardly needed it, his presence was more vigorous than any man his age had a right to be. I'll be assisting Director Makima and Hiroshi in a more advisory capacity, Yoshimura announced warmly. His tired eyes crinkled at the edges as he looked over the team. Think of me as an old owl perched in the rafters. I'll hoot if I foresee danger or if you need guidance. A few chuckles greeted Yoshimura's metaphor. Many of them deeply respected the man. He'd trained Hiroshi, and over the years he'd had a hand in mentoring quite a few present. Kishive gave the old man a tiny salute with 2 fingers, Yoshimura responded with a genial nod. Makima allowed the brief levity, then moved on to the next vital piece. She produced a slim black folder from under her arm sealed with a crimson wax emblem of the PSIA. Without a word, she handed it to Hiroshi. Hiroshi accepted it carefully, glancing at Makima in question. That, Makima said, addressing the room so all knew, is a list of resources and assets that we have gathered in secret. Consider it an arsenal for this war. Safe houses, equipment stockpiles, vehicles, untraceable funds, and even a few allies positioned in various agencies who have passed our loyalty tests. Her gaze was intense. Hiroshi, you are authorized to access and deploy any of these resources at your discretion. No further approval needed. That document is eyes only for you and me. Hiroshi nodded solemnly and tucked the folder inside his suit jacket. He felt the heft of it against his chest, a literal weight of responsibility. Understood. I'll put them to good use. Aki raised his hand slightly. Ma'am, do we have any support from units outside this one? Even if branches are compromised, perhaps individual trustworthy officers? Or military backup? Makima looked at Aki. A fair question. Officially, no. Unofficially. She traded a glance with Yoshimura. We have a handful of contacts in the ground self-defense forces and national police who are privately loyal. They are not in this room because exposing them would risk tipping our hand. But if needed, and if we can do so covertly, we may call on small teams from them for specific tasks. Otherwise, assume it's just us. Basically an independent cell, Madoka commented, his analytical mind already categorizing their status. Operating off the books under direct authority of the PM via you. It wasn't a question so much as a clarification for everyone's benefit. Makima inclined her head. Precisely. We're bypassing traditional command structures entirely. Too many leaks. As of now, consider yourselves a separate task force reporting only to me and Hiroshi. You will have to be self-sufficient and discreet. Kishive let out a low whistle. Ha! Always wanted to be part of an officially unofficial death squad, he joked darkly. But his hand casually rested on the hilt of one of his knives at his belt, a sign that he was ready to do whatever needed doing. Makima's eyes flashed at the terminology, but she didn't contradict it directly. Instead she said, our aim is not indiscriminate violence. It's to excise the cancer and restore integrity. But make no mistake, many of our enemies will be highly placed, heavily guarded, and perfectly willing to kill to keep their hold on power. We will meet force with force. She paused, then added coolly, lethal force is authorized against confirmed traitors and foreign operatives. We will try to capture intel sources alive if possible, but your safety and civilian safety come first. Understood. A chorus of firm yes ma'am and nods answered. Some, like Denji and Power, actually grinned at the prospect of a real fight without gloves. Others, like Kobani and Ere, swallowed nervously but set their jaws in determination. Makima took one more step forward, standing at the very edge of the small stage area in front of the projection screen. She clasped her hands behind her back and regarded the team with something almost like pride. "I chose every person in this room myself," she said quietly. "After the betrayal, I vetted and watched and tested. You are the ones I trust with this mission and with each other's lives. There is no one else." Her voice, normally so composed, had a rare note of raw emotion, a fierce sincerity that hit them all in the chest. This was her way of saying she believed in them completely. Some of the agents exchanged glances of steely resolve. Kobani stood a little taller, a little less shakily, emboldened that Makima believed in even her timid self. Denji felt a familiar warmth bloom in his chest. Makima's trust was like a drug to him, fueling his desire to prove himself. Aki thought of all the bitter losses and broken trust they'd endured. To hear Makima say "you are the ones I trust" was galvanizing. He placed his fist in his other hand and bowed his head slightly in a gesture of respect and promise. Makima's eyes swept over them one last time. "If anyone here does not wish to take on this burden, this is your chance to speak." She let silence reign for a moment, scanning faces for hesitation. Chapter 33, Tokyo Purge, X. No one flinched. Not even Kobani, who shook her head vigorously, eyes shining with anxiety and resolve. Angel yawned, then raised a hand lazily. "I would like to formally complain that this sounds like a lot of work," he said, voice monotone. A couple people snickered. Angel then gave a half smile. "But I'm in. Obviously." Makima almost looked amused. The tiniest uptick touched her lips before she composed herself. "Duly noted, Angel. Complaint registered." That broke the tension enough that the room found their voices. "We've come this far together. We'll see it through," Aki declared firmly, looking around at his teammates. A chorus of agreement met him. "Hell yeah, we will," Denji added, slamming a fist into his palm. "I'm not gonna let some slimy traitors or foreign creeps take over my home. They're in for a world of hurt." Power pumped a fist triumphantly. "A glorious purge. I shall mount the heads of our enemies on pikes," she proclaimed. That earned a few groans and laughs and a stern side-eye from Aki, but no one doubted she meant it figuratively. "Probably." Himeno gave Hiroji a reassuring nod. "We're with you, sir. All the way. You lead, we'll follow." The Cyclops woman's usual teasing tone was gone, replaced by earnest loyalty. "Just promise us one thing." She then grinned, a bit of her old mischief returning. "When all this is over, you're buying the first round of drinks." A wave of chuckles rolled through the team. Hiroji found himself smiling, tension bleeding out of his shoulders. "It's a deal," he agreed. "I'll buy a whole barrel of sake if you want." "Make it 2 barrels, Kishive chimed in, his scarred face breaking into a rare broad grin. "One for me, one for the kids." Kobani let out a tearful little laugh, emotion welling up from the swirl of fear and relief inside her. She clenched her small fists and mustered her voice. "I'll do my best. I won't run away," she said, cheeks wet but eyes determined. Eri put a comforting arm around her shoulders for a second, nodding his own agreement. Madoka stepped forward slightly. He removed his glasses, wiped them, then put them back on a gesture of clarity. "Director Makima," he said formally, "I almost resigned once, after." He trailed off, alluding to the night of betrayal. Everyone remembered Madoka handing Makima a letter in the rain, saying he had enough. "But I came back. Because I realized I still have colleagues worth fighting for. I won't falter again. I'm with you until the end." Makima looked at Madoka, and something unspoken passed between them, acknowledgement of their shared history and a promise kept. "Thank you, Madoka," she said softly. One by one, each member gave their affirmation. Eri, pushing aside the last of his nerves, "Count me in. I'm done being the rookie, I want to help take these bastards down." Angel, stretching languidly, if I must trade my naps for battle, so be it. I expect a long vacation after, though. Kishive unscrewed his flask and raised it slightly as if in toast. To purging Tokyo, he said wryly. Don't worry, I'll keep these pups in line. Hiroshi couldn't remain silent at that. He stepped up beside Makima, turning to face his assembled friends, his unit, his responsibility. His heart swelled with pride at their unwavering response. Thank you, all of you, Hiroshi said, voice strong. I know the risks are high. But I swear to you, I will do everything in my power to lead us to victory and keep you safe. We watch out for each other. We stand together, or we fall together. Together, Aki echoed firmly. Together. Denji added, thrusting a fist upward. Power copied him, and then, one after another, they all did, raising fists, weapons, or simply nodding in unity. Makima allowed herself a small, genuine smile at the sight. For the first time in a long while, perhaps since before the betrayal, she felt a spark of hope. Very well, she said, and there was a quiet pride in her voice. Operation Purge Phase 1 begins now. She gestured to the screen, where the word Tokyo hovered above concentric rings of threat markers. Tokyo is our first battleground. We have 1 year to cleanse it of this rot. In that time, we will dismantle corrupt networks, expel or eliminate foreign agents, shut down illegal facilities, and neutralize traitors. From there, we will spread to the rest of Japan and reclaim each region. Makima's eyes blazed with conviction. We will take back our country from the shadows. A chorus of determined yes ma'am, answered her, loud enough to bounce off the concrete walls. Makima nodded approvingly. Hiroshi will give you further details in a moment and assign preliminary squads and tasks. She looked at her watch briefly. It's currently 0400 hours. No one was surprised to find it was almost morning. Time had lost meaning in their travel and debrief. I want all of you to get whatever rest you can in the next few hours. We convene again at 0700 for detailed briefings and to commence operations. We have secure barracks prepared on sub-level 3 of this facility. Use them, you will need your strength. For a moment, some of them hesitated. Rest? Now? They had expected to charge out the door, guns blazing perhaps. But Makima was right, they were exhausted from travel and previous fights. And a war wasn't won in one night. Yoshimura cleared his throat gently. Consider this the calm before the storm, he said. Trust us, you want to be fresh when the storm hits. His kindly smile took on a razor edge. Tokyo won't purge itself in a day. But dawn is coming, and we have work to do. With those words, Makima gave a final, satisfied glance over her assembled troops. Dismissed, for now, she said. Then, in a somewhat softer, sincere tone, she added, I am proud of each and every one of you. Let's save our home. The agents began to move not with disorder, but with purpose. Some headed for the exit where a few PSIA support staff, the few cleared to be here, waited to guide them to quarters or a mess hall for a hot meal. Denji stretched hugely and groaned, Man, I could eat a whole cow. They got food here, right? Real Japanese food? I'm sick of ration bars. He was practically drooling at the thought of hot miso and rice. Kobani managed a light giggle at Denji's singular focus. There's always food on your mind, Denji. Day. Revolution runs on food. Denji grinned, grabbing Aki by the arm. Oi, Aki, you gotta have some ramen with me, for old time's sake, before we all go to battle or whatever. Aki rolled his eyes, but the corners of his mouth quirked up. All right, all right. I could use some coffee at least. He caught Himeno's eye and nodded towards the exit, silently inviting her to join them. Himeno slipped her arm through Kobani's and Are's. Let's get some warm tea into you two. You both look like you've seen a ghost. Are let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. I kind of feel like I have, he admitted. Multiple ghosts. Political ghosts. Kobani exhaled shakily and leaned on Himeno's steady presence. Tea sounds nice, she said softly. Maybe with lots of sugar. Across the room, Kishive clapped Hiroshi on the back firmly. Not bad, assistant director. You did good for your first troop rally, he said. That was high praise, coming from Kishive. Now get some shut-eye. You look like you haven't slept in days. Hiroshi did feel the weight of fatigue now that adrenaline was ebbing. He gave a wry smile. I will. You too, Kishive, you're not as young as the rest of us, after all. Kishive barked a laugh. Brat. I'll outlast you all. He then fished out a new cigarette and placed it between his lips. But maybe I will catch a nap. I have a feeling we won't get many once this kicks off. As Kishive strolled off, whistling an old tune, Angel drifted past Hiroshi, looking as if he might float into bed any second. I'm heading to sub-level 3 before someone asks me to lift heavy objects or something, Angel drawled. He gave Hiroshi a lazy two-finger salute. See you at the bright and cheery hour of 7, boss. If I'm not up, please toss a bucket of water on me. Hiroshi chuckled. If you're not up, power might do worse than water, he joked. Angel smirked faintly. Good point. I'll set an alarm. He moved on, hands in pockets. Madoka was gathering his folders and laptop, methodically tucking everything under one arm. He approached Makima before leaving. The two exchanged a quiet few words, perhaps about specifics he'd continue working on, and Makima placed a light hand on Madoka's shoulder, an almost familial gesture, before sending him off to rest. Madoka looked noticeably more at ease than when he first walked in, as if the weight of isolation had been lifted by being among comrades again. Power bounded up to Hiroshi next, Denji in tow. Hiroshi, she exclaimed, using his real name comfortably now. I demand you tell me where the strongest enemy is so I can fight them first. Her eyes sparkled with battle lust. Denji elbowed her. Idiot, we don't even know who they are yet. You can't just ask to fight now. Power pouted, then waved a hand dismissively. Fine. Then I demand extra meat for breakfast. Fighting spirit must be nourished. Hiroshi broke into a genuine laugh. It felt good, amidst all this darkness, to have these moments. I'll see what I can do, Power. Maybe the cooks have some steaks on hand for our mighty warrior. He turned to Denji. And you, Denji, get some sleep. You've had a hell of a week. Consider that an order. Denji gave a mock salute but was grinning. You got it. But seriously, thanks for, being cool. I thought this meeting would be all doom and gloom. He rubbed his nose, almost shyly. You made it, not so scary. Hiroshi's chest warmed. If he did nothing else right as a leader, at least he'd managed to ease the fear a little. He clapped Denji on the shoulder. We laugh in the face of fear, right? And punch fear in the face too, Denji replied, throwing a playful jab. Night, Hiroshi. Don't stay up too late reading that secret list or whatever. With that, he tugged at Power's sleeve. Come in, let's go find that meat you wanted. The two tromped off, already resuming an argument about who would win in a fight, an army of Pikachu or one chainsaw-wielding man, Denji's weird imagination running wild. Soon, the hall emptied out save for Makima, Hiroshi, and Yashimura. The projection screen was dark now, only the humming lights remained, reflecting off the polished floor where minutes ago a dozen agents had stood with fists raised. Hiroshi let out a long breath, his shoulders finally sagging. The adrenaline of the briefing was wearing off, and a bone-deep fatigue crept in. Makima stepped closer, her voice low and gentle in the quiet. You handled them well, she said. They trust you. They're ready. Hiroshi ran a hand through his silver hair, chuckling softly. I just followed your example, be honest, but not hopeless. And maybe crack a joke or two to keep sane. He looked at Makima, his blue eyes earnest. Thank you for trusting me with this, Director. I won't let you down. Makima regarded him for a moment, then did something unexpected. She reached out and lightly squeezed his upper arm, a rare show of personal warmth. I know you won't, she said simply. There was absolute confidence in her tone, which made Hiroshi stand a little taller despite his weariness. Remember, you're not alone in this either. You have us. Yoshimura gave a grandfatherly grin. You did splendid, son. I almost wanted to jump up and join the fist-waving myself. He chuckled. Now, get some rest while you can. Tomorrow, or rather, later this morning, you'll have to start using that brilliant mind of yours to devise our game plan. Yes, sir, Hiroshi said with a smile. Yoshimura being there, calling him son as he did years ago, it grounded him. Together, the three of them, Makima, Hiroshi, and Yoshimura, made their way to the exit, last out of the briefing hall. The lights automatically shut off behind them, plunging the room into darkness once more, as if sealing away the secrets shared within. In the corridor, a few guards snapped to attention as Makima and the others passed. The facility buzzed faintly with the sound of ventilation and the distant echo of footsteps, the night crew keeping watch. It felt almost peaceful down here, insulated from the chaos above. Makima paused at a junction. I have a call with the Prime Minister in half an hour, she said to Hiroshi and Yoshimura. Even now, her work didn't stop. I'll sleep after I send him a preliminary assurance that Phase 1 is underway. Yoshimura shook his head, half in admiration, half in concern. Don't push too hard, Makima. Even you need rest. He teased lightly, we can't purge Tokyo if our commander-in-chief collapses from exhaustion. Chapter 34, Operation, Indefinite Stay. A black PSIA sedan deposited Hiroshi at the entrance of one of Tokyo's finest hotels just past 5 a.m., the sky still a dark pre-dawn blue. As he stepped through the glass doors into the grand lobby, Hiroshi's breath almost caught in his throat. Polished marble floors stretched out before him, reflecting the soft glow of crystal chandeliers overhead. The space was spacious and serene, nearly empty at this early hour save for a few impeccably dressed staff. This is indefinite lodging, he mused incredulously, heart thumping a bit faster. Outwardly, however, he maintained the same cool, composed demeanor he wore in any high-security operation. Years of espionage had seen him stride through similar luxury hotels under various aliases: billionaire tech mogul, foreign dignitary, crime boss's consigliere, but never as Hiroshi Kobayashi himself. It felt surreal. As he crossed the lobby with measured steps, he murmured under his breath, they really rolled out the red carpet. His tone was wry, but inside he was marveling like a country kid in the big city. Makima had certainly delivered on her promise. This hotel was beyond fancy. Near the gleaming reception desk, a smartly uniformed concierge bowed deeply. Ohei gozaimasu, Hiroshi-sama. Welcome, she greeted in a gentle voice, straightening to offer him a warm smile. Hiroshi had to school his expression not to show surprise at the honorific sama attached to his first name. He wasn't used to hearing such respect directed at him openly, especially not under his real identity. With a polite nod, he approached, sliding a government ID across the counter. The concierge needed only a glance. Your suite is prepared and awaiting your arrival. We hope you find everything to your satisfaction. Another small bow. Professional, courteous, and not a hint of curiosity in her eyes, the staff had clearly been well informed that their young VIP guest was not one to be fussed over. Thank you, Hiroshi replied softly, mustering the refined politeness he'd used 100 times while undercover as high society. Hiroshi-sama, he echoed in his mind with a faint, bemused smirk. If only his old covert ops buddies could see this. He accepted the ornate keycard packet from the concierge. Please let us know if you require anything at all, sir, she added. We've taken the liberty of stocking the suite with groceries and amenities per Director Makama's instructions. Perfect. Hiroshi inclined his head appreciatively. That sounded like Makama's thoroughness indeed. Without lingering, he made his way to the elevators, posture relaxed but confident. Even at this hour, he could feel the discreet glances of staff noting his presence, security in suits by the doors, a housekeeper quietly polishing a marble pillar. All paid him the silent respect due an elite guest. Hiroshi couldn't help a quiet chuckle once the elevator doors closed behind him. In the mirrored interior, he caught sight of himself, slightly disheveled from the long night, silver hair tousled, tie loosened at his collar. Not exactly the picture of a pampered VIP, he thought with a grin. But no one downstairs had batted an eye, they saw only what Makama's arrangements wanted them to see, a young assistant director of PSIA, deserving of utmost deference. The elevator dinged softly at the top floor. Hiroshi stepped out into a hushed, carpeted hallway illuminated by tasteful wall sconces. A few paces down, he found his door. With a beep of the keycard and a quiet click, the double doors swung open into his suite. Hiroshi flicked on the lights and whistled under his breath as he stepped inside. The place was enormous. He toed off his shoes at the entryway automatically, the habit drilled into him by both Japanese custom and a desire to keep any mud of the field off pristine floors, and ventured in, jaw tight to restrain an open gape. The suite opened into a stylish living area with a high ceiling and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a twinkling panorama of Tokyo's skyline. Plush cream-colored sofas and armchairs beckoned around a low glass coffee table, and thick, cloud-soft rugs covered the floor. Off to one side, he noted a sleek open kitchen complete with an island counter and bar stools. Stainless steel appliances gleamed under discreet cabinet lighting. There was a full stove, an oven, even a rice cooker and blender neatly tucked in. It was a proper kitchen, not a token kitchenette, clearly meant for actual use. Beyond the living room, double sliding doors, currently open, revealed the bedroom, a king-sized bed draped in an elegant navy duvet and a heap of inviting pillows. Hiroshi could imagine sinking into that bed and never wanting to leave. Adjacent to the bedroom, through another door, he glimpsed a spa-like bathroom. He saw marble countertops and what looked like a jacuzzi tub, as well as a panel of digital controls on the wall. A high-tech bathroom, indeed. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling a small laugh of disbelief. I could get used to this, he murmured. So this was the perk of being a government big shot, 5-star accommodations, no questions asked. It was easily the most luxurious safe house he'd ever stayed in. Usually, his lodgings during missions were upscale out of necessity, but he always occupied them under a false name, with one eye on the exit. This time, he was here for real, under his own identity, and the place was meant to be home. Home. The word made him pause in the silent suite. Could he really call anywhere home now? He shook off the heavy thought quickly. This was not the time for brooding. He had maybe 2 hours before he had to be back for the 7 a.m. briefing. If he was going to rest at all, he needed to maximize every minute here. Hiroshi shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over the back of a chair. As he did, a small motion at his waist reminded him of his most important companions. 6 minimized pokeballs were clipped on his belt, and another 6 on a second belt in his inner pocket. 12 in total. With a faint smile, Hiroshi strode to the center of the living area, where there was plenty of space, and unclipped the balls one by one. All right, everyone, he said quietly, anticipation warming his tired voice, we're home, for now. Time to stretch your legs. With a practiced motion, he tossed the pokeballs into the air, one after another. In mid-flight the balls snapped open, and bursts of white light filled the suite in rapid succession. Chapter 35, Indefinite Stay, 2. One by one, his Pokémon materialized in the room. A sinuous dragonair unfurled in midair, its sapphire blue scales shimmering as it gave a soft, musical trill. Reishu emerged next in a flash of electricity, landing nimbly on the couch with a thump of its striped tail and an eager wry. Hot on its heels, Daisy the Gardevoir appeared in a graceful pose, emerald eyes already scanning their new surroundings with calm curiosity. By Daisy's side materialized Akemi the Kurla, who immediately did a delighted little spin on one foot, overjoyed to be out of her ball and in a spacious place. An instant later, a tall, mustached Alakazam took shape, hovering meditatively a few inches above the carpet with legs crossed, clutching his 2 spoons. Melodic came next, her long, elegant body coiling in loops across the marble entryway as she let out a low, melodious cry. The beautiful water serpent's red eyes flickered with interest at the faint scent of chlorine and bath salts wafting from the bathroom. On the other side of the room, a Charmeleon burst forth, immediately shaking out its limbs and snorting a small puff of smoke. Its flame-tipped tail swished, casting flickering light and shadows. Wartortle appeared right behind Charmeleon in a pop of light, the blue turtle Pokémon yawning widely and blinking around with groggy curiosity. The floorboards gave a creaking groan as Laren materialized, its hefty, armor-plated body landing with a solid thud. The iron Pokémon snorted and began sniffing the air for something metallic to munch. A half-beat later, an Ivysaur blinked into existence near the open kitchen, its green bulb-topped body already perking up at the plethora of new scents, and perhaps hoping some potted plant decor might be around for a nibble. Near Ivysaur, a small grey Machop materialized in a crouch, then stood and stretched, flexing its muscled arms reflexively. And finally, with a chirruping Swablu, a tiny Swablu flapped into existence, its cottony white wings fluttering as it took excited loops around the room like a feathered ping-pong ball. In seconds, the quiet, elegant suite became lively with activity. Hiroshi couldn't help but grin. This ragtag collection of Pokémon was his family, and seeing them safe and excited in a peaceful setting filled him with a deep warmth. He held up a hand lightly. "Okay, team, go ahead and explore," he said. "Just, try not to destroy anything, alright? This place is on loan." He added that last part wryly, given some of their rambunctious tendencies, it needed to be said. Daisy, ever the composed second-in-command, gave a gentle telepathic chime of acknowledgement in Hiroshi's mind. She glided further into the living room, her gown-like white dress rustling over the plush carpet. With a graceful motion, she ran a slender green hand along the back of the sofa, testing the fabric. The Gardevoir's lips curved in a mild smile of approval at the sofa's softness. Finding it to her liking, Daisy delicately settled herself onto one end of it, crossing her legs and observing the room like a quiet sentry. Always assessing, always protecting, even in relaxation, she was vigilant. Swablu, meanwhile, zoomed straight for the open bedroom. The little blue bird Pokémon had spotted the massive plush bed and could not resist. With a high-pitched trill, Swablu dive-bombed onto the bed's duvet. Pomph! The mattress barely bounced under the tiny Pokémon's weight, but Swablu squealed anyway, bouncing up and down in pure joy. It flapped its cottony wings, puffing up little tufts of the duvet as it hopped about. After a few energetic springs, Swablu noticed it had mussed up the perfectly arranged pillows. Ever a tidy creature, it let out a concerned blew, then busied itself nudging one pillow back into place with its head and smoothing the plush covers with its soft wings. Satisfied that the bed was neat, or at least its version of neat, Swablu nestled into the mountain of pillows with a content coup, already claiming its favorite spot. Near the entryway, Machop's eyes had gone wide at something in the corner of the living area. "Chop! Machop!" it exclaimed, scampering over on its stubby legs. There, by the floor-to-ceiling window, was a small rack of dumbbells and even a compact weight bench, part of the suite's amenities for health-conscious guests. To Machop, it was like discovering treasure. The little superpower Pokémon reverently ran a hand over one of the larger dumbbells, which probably weighed 20 kilograms, nothing too heavy for an average human, but Machop was thrilled. With an eager gleam in its eye, Machop wrapped both hands around the metal bar and hefted it overhead. It proceeded to do a set of energetic reps, lifting the weight up and down as if it were filled with feathers instead of iron. Chop, 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 it chanted with each pump, tiny muscles bulging. Hiroshi watched from a distance, hiding a smile behind his hand. Trust Machop to find the gym equipment immediately. The thump of Machop's impromptu weightlifting drew Laren's attention. The stocky steel type had been snuffling around, following its nose, or rather, sensitive metal detecting horn, toward the kitchen, but now it turned and lumbered over curiously. Laren's heavy footfalls thudded on the floor, and Hiroshi momentarily worried about the structural integrity of the hardwood. The Pokémon nosed up to Machop, sniffing at the dumbbell it was lifting. Perhaps the scent of iron enticed Laren's appetite, or maybe it was just curious about Machop's activity. Either way, Laren gave an approving grunt. Its steel-gray armor plates caught the reflection of Tokyo's city lights as it tilted its head. Clang! Before Hiroshi could intervene, Laren playfully head-butted the weight lightly by its standards, but enough to yank the heavy dumbbell right out of Machop's hands. Machop stumbled back, arms flailing in surprise. The weight hit the carpet with a muffled whump, thank Arceus for thick rug padding. Lie. Laren snickered in a low rumble, seemingly amused at Machop's startled expression. Machop was not truly upset. Its big red eyes blinked in confusion, then narrowed in determination. Machop, it huffed, which in tone probably meant something like, hey, I was using that. The little fighting type squared up to Laren's broad form and actually flexed an arm as if to say don't mess with my workout. Laren, entirely unthreatened, gave what could only be described as a chuckling snort and patted Machop on the head with the blunt side of its armored horn. The gesture was almost brotherly, if clumsy. Machop pouted and rubbed its head where the horn had bonked it, but any potential quarrel was quickly diffused by a sharp clearing of the throat noise from the sofa area. Chapter 36, Indefinite Stay, 3. Daisy sat primly on the couch, watching the two with a mild but warning gaze. She hadn't made a sound vocally, but the gentle psychic pressure in that throat-clearing ahem was unmistakable. Behave. Machop immediately straightened up, abashed, and Laren lowered its head in something like an apologetic nod. Hiroshi smothered a laugh. Daisy had long ago established herself as the matriarch of this motley crew, and even the boisterous ones knew better than to get truly out of line under her watch. While that mini-drama played out, Reishu had been busy making mischief elsewhere. The orange electric mouse had leaped from the couch as soon as it appeared and zeroed in on the open-plan kitchen. Rai, it whispered to itself, nose twitching. It could smell food. In a blur of tan fur, Reishu scampered up onto the kitchen island and beelined for a decorative wooden bowl that sat on the counter. Sure enough, it was filled with a welcome gift from the hotel, assorted snacks and fruit for the esteemed guest. To Reishu's delight, there was a bag of chocolate-covered biscuits peeking out, an indulgence likely meant for Hiroshi, but Reishu had other ideas. Glancing left and right with a conspiratorial air, Reishu extended a paw and quietly snagged the bag from the bowl. It held the treat behind its back, long lightning bolt tail swishing as it considered how to open the packaging without alerting anyone. Perhaps a tiny thunder shock to zap it open? Just as a spark danced on its cheek sacs, a voice called out. Reishu! I see you over there. Hiroshi's tone was sing-song, amused but cautionary. He had one eye on the kitchen even as he strolled toward the fridge. The mouse Pokémon froze, paw literally in the cookie jar. Slowly, Reishu turned its head toward its trainer, big ears drooping innocently as it tried to hide the pilfered snack behind its round body. Chew, it squeaked, as if to say who, me? I wasn't doing anything. Hiroshi raised an eyebrow, fighting back a grin. He crossed his arms in an exaggerated display of authority. Drop the goodies, he ordered playfully. Unless you want double training drills later. Reishu considered this, weighing the cookies against the threat. Finally, with an exaggerated sigh, it set the bag back into the bowl, albeit with obvious reluctance. Satisfied, Hiroshi gave it a warm wink. Good try, though. You almost had it, he teased, and Reisha responded with a cheeky grin, leaping off the counter to trot back toward the living room now that its heist was thwarted. As it passed by Hiroshi, he reached down and gave Reisha an affectionate scratch behind one long ear. The electric type purred happily. It couldn't stay mad when it earned some attention in exchange. Not far from the kitchen, Ivysaur had discovered a tall ceramic vase in one corner of the suite, artfully filled with an arrangement of fresh local flowers and greenery. The grass Pokémon's eyes lit up. "Ivy," it chirped, padding over on 4 stubby legs. The pink petals of a camellia brush inside the vase beckoned irresistibly. Ivysaur gently inserted its broad-nosed snout into the arrangement, taking a deep sniff. A blissful expression crossed its face as the floral aroma tickled its senses. Content, it settled down next to the vase, the bud-like plant on its back quivering slightly as it absorbed the faint rays of dawn beginning to peek through the window. One vine lazily extended from Ivysaur's side, curling around the vase not to tip it, but almost as if hugging it. Trust Ivysaur to find the only greenery in the room and make a friend of it. On the opposite side, Charmeleon and Wartortle had made a beeline toward the hallway that led to the bathroom. Wartortle's sensitive ears had picked up the faint sound of water, likely the filter of the jacuzzi tub or maybe the auto-refill mechanism for the suite's humidifier. Either way, the turtle Pokémon toddled eagerly toward the bathroom door, shell bobbing. Charmeleon, not particularly interested in water, in fact, usually avoiding it, followed at a more relaxed pace, mostly sticking its nose into every open doorway out of simple curiosity. As Wartortle pushed the bathroom door open with its paw, a humid waft of scented air greeted them. There were indeed some spa features active, perhaps a small indoor fountain on the vanity or a high-end humidifier making the air dewy. Wartortle's eyes went wide at the sight inside, a sunken whirlpool tub, probably big enough to fit 4 humans. It was currently empty, but that didn't deter the water type's imagination. With a thrilled cry of tortoise, Wartortle scampered up to the tub's edge and peered inside. It padded around, found a digital panel, blinking in standby, and began pawing at it curiously. Charmeleon poked its head in over Wartortle's shoulder, arms crossed, a dubious expression on its red snout. "Char," it growled softly, as if to say, "What's got you so excited?" But when Charmeleon saw the tub, it just rolled its eyes and gave a harumph. "Water, how boring!" Charmeleon instead turned its attention to the fancy electronic toilet nearby, sniffing the unfamiliar contraption and accidentally triggering the motion sensor so the lid opened automatically. The startled fire lizard jumped back, tail flame flaring in surprise. Wartortle, hearing the whir of the toilet lid, glanced over and burst into laughter, a series of rapid Wartortle chuckles. Charmeleon grumbled and swatted the air, pretending it wasn't spooked, then decided to leave the bathroom to the water lover. It brushed past Wartortle with a gentle shove of its claw, a humph, have your fun gesture, and ambled back out toward the main room, drawn by the smell of, was that food cooking? Chapter 37, Indefinite Stay, 4. Yes, indeed. While his Pokémon explored, Hiroshi had set to work in the kitchen. He'd flung open the double-door refrigerator to assess the promised provisions, and he was not disappointed. They weren't kidding about stocked ingredients, he murmured, eyes scanning the bounty within. Fresh meats neatly wrapped in butcher paper, an array of vegetables and fruits, including a whole shelf of various berries perfect, cartons of eggs, packages of rice and noodles, even a selection of sauces and spices. Everything he could possibly need for a hearty meal was at his fingertips. And after months of surviving on field rations and quick grabs of convenience store food, the prospect of cooking a real meal, even a quick one, was positively thrilling. Hiroshi rolled up the sleeves of his dress shirt and set about his task with efficient determination. "All right, let's do this," he said to himself, tying a spare apron, left hanging on a pantry hook, around his waist. He began plucking items from the fridge and cupboards, moving with sure-footed grace around the kitchen. In no time, he had several things going at once. A frying pan sizzled on the stovetop, a pot of water came to boil, and a cutting board was piled with sliced fruits and vegetables. As he worked, some of the Pokémon started to gravitate toward the mouth-watering aromas wafting through the suite. Machop's stomach gave an audible gurgle after its exertion with the weights, and it bounded over to the kitchen area, peeking up over the island counter with excitement. Charmeleon, drawn from the bathroom, sauntered in more casually, nostrils flaring at the scent of searing meat. It licked its fanged lips unconsciously. Ivysaur lifted its head from beside the vase, the tendrils on its back twitching as the smell of roasting vegetables reached it. With a happy little rumble, it trotted over as well, sitting itself down by the kitchen entrance, nose in the air. Hiroshi deftly flipped a pair of salmon fillets in the pan, their skin crackling to a perfect golden brown. In another pan, thin slices of beef sizzled in garlic. He'd found Wajihu strips in the fridge, nothing but the best, apparently. He tossed a pinch of salt and some Pokémon-safe seasoning over them. On the counter, a large salad bowl sat filled with a colorful mix of leafy greens and chopped berries, lightly tossed in a mild dressing, a refreshing dish for the more delicate palates on the team. Next to that, he had arranged a tray of neatly chopped sweet berries drizzled with honey and yogurt, almost like a parfait without the glass, for the sweet-toothed duo. Knowing Laren's needs, Hiroshi also pulled out a container of specialized mineral kibble. The hotel had even stocked Pokémon food, bless them. He poured a generous heap of the iron-enriched pellets into a metal mixing bowl he'd found. It wasn't exactly a gourmet dish, but Laren would prefer those crunchy minerals to anything he could cook. As he stirred a bubbling pot of oatmeal, into which he was mixing oran berries and nuts for a hearty side dish for the others, Hiroshi felt a gentle tug at his pant leg. He glanced down to see Akemi the Kurla looking up at him with bright eyes, her hands clasped in front of her pleadingly. "Kurleen," she chimed, standing on her tiptoes to peer at the sweet berry tray on the counter. Being a psychic/fairy type, Kurla had a well-known penchant for confections and fruits. Hiroshi chuckled and reached over to ruffle the little Pokémon's green bowl-cut hair. "Don't worry, Akemi, I haven't forgotten you," he said kindly. With a quick flourish, he took a small porcelain saucer and plated a few of the honeyed berries on it, adding a dollop of whipped cream from a tub he'd discovered in the fridge. He handed the treat down to Kurla. "Here, a preview. But pace yourself, okay? Breakfast is coming in just a minute." Akemi beamed and gave an excited twirl, almost spilling a berry in the process. She took the saucer in both tiny hands and pirouetted away, nibbling a raspberry happily as she went. The Kurla settled herself on the sofa armrest near Daisy, kicking her little legs contentedly. Daisy glanced at the saucer and shook her head with a fond smile. She telepathically reminded Akemi not to spoil her appetite, earning a good-natured giggle from the younger psychic type. By now, other Pokémon had gathered around the open kitchen, noses twitching and eyes wide. Machop was practically bouncing on the balls of its feet, trying to peek over the counter to see if the meat was done. Charmeleon leaned coolly against the wall, but its constant tail swish betrayed its impatience. Wartortle emerged from the hallway as well, drawn by the scent of food, and perhaps realizing the tub would have to wait, it trotted over, still dampness clinging to its turtle shell from the humid bathroom, and licked its lips at the smell of grilled fish. Dragonair had coiled its long body near the dining table, its elegant head raised inquisitively as it detected the aroma of fresh salmon. Dragonair loved a good fish meal. Alakazam had floated nearer as well, though he hung back with his arms folded, hovering just at the edge of the kitchen aloof, but definitely interested. Even Laren had clanked over, excited by the general anticipation of feeding time, and settled next to Ivysaur, its armored tail thumping the floor thud, thud, with eagerness. Hiroshi found himself surrounded by a semicircle of expectant eyes and salivating snouts. All right, patience," he scolded playfully as he juggled pans and plates. "I've only got 2 hands here. Daisy, mind giving me a little help?" At his request, Daisy inclined her head gracefully from her place on the couch. Without needing another word, the Gardevoire's eyes glowed a soft blue and several objects in the kitchen glowed in response: knives, spatulas, bowls lifting as if guided by invisible strings. With careful precision, and clearly mindful of not startling her teammates, Daisy used her telekinesis to assist. The cutting board slid aside as soon as Hiroshi finished chopping, the knob on the oven turned off exactly when the pastries warming inside were ready, a stack of plates floated out from a cabinet and landed gently on the counter, ready for serving. "Thanks, sous-chef," Hiroshi quipped over his shoulder. He felt a pulse of gentle affirmation from Daisy's mind to his. She was happy to help. In short order, Hiroshi began plating up the impromptu feast. He worked swiftly, arranging each dish with care because he knew how each Pokémon liked their food. For Daisy and Melodic, who he could see watching from the entryway, her long body half in the hall eagerly awaiting a call, he prepared the delicate salmon fillets, placing them on a bed of lightly steamed vegetables with just a pinch of salt. The flavor was mild and refined, just how those two liked it. For Charmeleon and Machop, he heaped plates with the garlic sautéed beef slices and a mound of protein-rich scrambled eggs on the side. "Extra protein for the heavy hitters," he announced as he set those plates down on the island. Machop flexed in excitement and Charmeleon actually let out a pleased growl, flames flickering at the tip of its tail more brightly. For Wartortle and Dragonair, Hiroshi split the difference, each got a salmon fillet as well, both being fond of fish, but he drizzled Wartortles with a bit of soy and citrus for a zesty kick and gave Dragonair an extra portion of salad to appease its more dragon-like taste for fruits and herbs. Ivysaur's plate was a colorful salad bowl topped with assorted berries and a side of the berry nut oatmeal. Ivysaur loved sweet fruits and veggies, and Hiroshi knew it wasn't keen on meat. The grass type waddled up happily as he set the salad on the floor for it, immediately nibbling at the greens with a content sorber. Akimi's and Swablu's treats were ready too. He presented the little berry parfaits he'd assembled, plus a couple of flaky croissants he'd found in the pantry and warmed in the oven. He placed Kurla's portion on the coffee table where she and Daisy sat. Kurla clapped and practically sparkled with joy at the pastries and fruit. Swablu fluttered off the bed at the smell of those croissants and zoomed back into the living room, perching right on the coffee table's edge. The fluffy bird pecked curiously at a blueberry on its plate, then chirped in delight and began gobbling its sweet breakfast, occasionally wiping its beak on its cottony wing with dainty manners. Akimi giggled and broke off a piece of croissant to feed to Swablu as they shared the desserts, the two smallest Pokémon enjoying their sugary dawn feast together. Daisy watched them with a gentle, indulgent expression, occasionally taking a delicate bite of her own steamed veggies. Refined as ever, Daisy ate slowly, savoring the simple, clean flavors and giving Hiroshi an approving nod from across the room. Laren, who had been stomping impatiently, making the silverware rattle, as everyone else got their plates, finally got its turn. Hiroshi knelt down and slid the big metal bowl of mineral kibble right in front of Laren. "Here you go, big guy. Your favorite, rocks and iron," he teased affectionately, patting the steel-type sturdy flank. Laren gave a delighted grunt and immediately shoved its snout into the bowl, crunching the mineral chow with a sound like a garbage disposal chewing gravel. Hiroshi winced playfully. "Geez, Laren, not so loud. Chew softly, for our neighbor's sake, hey." Of course, soft chewing was impossible for a creature with jaws like a nutcracker and a taste for literal rocks, but one could hope. Laren at least tried to lower the volume by slowing down a tad, munching with what might pass for guilty moderation. Within minutes, the suite was filled with the sounds of a very happy breakfast, munching, slurping, contented growls and chirps. The air smelled of cooked fish and warm bread, giving the sterile luxury of the hotel suite a cozy, homey atmosphere. Hiroshi leaned against the kitchen counter, finally allowing himself a moment to breathe. He watched his Pokémon eat with a fond, almost parental smile. Machop had plopped itself right on the floor by the island, legs splayed out as it shoveled strips of beef and eggs into its mouth with uncontained zeal. Halfway through, Machop remembered its manners and looked up. Machop. It flexed an arm as if to say this is great fuel. Then gave Hiroshi a thumbs up with a goofy grin, cheeks stuffed. Hiroshi chuckled, "Glad you like it. Slow down or you'll choke." Machop dutifully slowed its chewing, though its eyes sparkled with bliss at the rich protein. Charmeleon was more restrained, but only just. It sat cross-legged near Machop, poking at the scrambled eggs curiously before scarfing them. The fire lizard's tail flame danced with each bite, Charmeleon's equivalent of a wagging tail. At one point, a stray ember from its tail landed on the rim of its plate, charring the edge. Charmeleon snorted and quickly tamped it out with a claw, glancing up to see if anyone noticed its little accident. Daisy did, giving it a light telekinetic flick on the ear. Not painful, just a hey, careful gesture. Charmeleon lowered its head sheepishly and resumed eating with a bit more caution, carefully curling its tail around its feet to avoid further mishaps. Wartortle devoured its salmon with gusto, gnawing and slurping until not a scrap remained. It licked a bit of sauce off its stubby fingers and sighed contentedly, rubbing its belly. Noticing Dragonair still had a few bites left on its plate, the elegant serpent ate slowly, taking small bites with its tiny fang-like teeth. Wartortle sidled up and gave Dragonair a wide, hopeful grin. "Tor? Wartor," it begged, pointing to the remaining morsel of fish. Dragonair rolled its big violet eyes good-naturedly and flicked its tail to slide its plate toward Wartortle, conceding the last bite. With a happy yip, Wartortle gobbled the offered piece and nuzzled Dragonair's side in thanks. Dragonair responded by gently coiling the tip of its tail around Wartortle in a brief hug, then slithered away toward the balcony window, seemingly energized by the meal and the approaching sunrise. Alakazam finished its modest portion of oatmeal and fruit quietly, dabbing its mouth with a floating napkin like a gentleman at high tea. It hovered over to Hiroshi's side then, giving a slight nod of thanks. Hiroshi nodded back, knowing Alakazam was never one for chatter, but the contentment in the psychic Pokémon's eyes was clear. Chapter 38, Indefinite Stay, v. All the while, Hiroshi had been preparing a plate for himself as well. He finally scraped the last of the eggs and beef from the pans onto a dish, adding a bit of salad and a buttered roll. Nothing fancy, he was far too tired to make a separate gourmet dish for himself, but it looked hearty and satisfying. He set his plate aside on the counter for the moment. There was one more thing he needed, besides food, to truly start feeling human again: a hot shower. He glanced at the wall clock. 5:50 a.m. time was slipping by. If he wanted even a short rest, he'd have to be quick. But he also knew if he sat down to eat first in his current state, the food coma might claim him before he ever rinsed the grime of the night's battles off his body. Better to freshen up now, then eat and catch a power nap. Seeing that everyone was happily occupied with their breakfasts, and likely ready to doze off right after, Hiroshi cleared his throat gently. "Guys, I'm going to grab a quick shower," he announced. "Behave yourselves. And please don't wreck anything while I'm in there. That means you, Reishu." He shot the electric mouse a mock stern look. Reishu, who was busy licking berry juice off its paws, gave an offended squeak as if to say, "Me? Never." The effect was somewhat ruined by the fact that its orange snout was smeared with a bit of chocolate from the earlier cookie attempt. Hiroshi laughed and shook his head. Daisy stood from the couch in a fluid motion. She stepped towards Hiroshi and gave a small bow of her head, indicating she would keep watch. A silent understanding passed between them. He was vulnerable in the shower, so she'd mind the fort telepathically, just in case. Hiroshi knew it was extraordinarily unlikely anything would happen here. Makama's arrangements were undoubtedly secure, but old habits died hard for both him and his garde voir. "Thank you, Daisy," he said softly. Daisy responded by gently levitating his discarded suit jacket and folding it neatly over the back of a chair, as if to say, "Go, I've got this." Hiroshi grabbed a clean change of clothes from the single suitcase that had been delivered earlier, the sum total of his personal belongings, really. Then he made his way to the bathroom, stepping around Wartortle, who was now stretched out on the cool bathroom tiles, looking ready for a post-meal nap right there. "Excuse me, buddy," Hiroshi chuckled as he carefully stepped over the snoozing turtle. Wartortle opened one eye and gave a lazy wave of its paw before drifting off, clearly in bliss. The bathroom lights came on with a soft motion-activated glow. Hiroshi set his fresh clothes on the counter and took in the sight. The jacuzzi tub was indeed massive, and there was even a small attached sauna room behind a glass door. But those could wait for another time. The rainfall shower, an array of high-tech nozzles and a digital temperature display beckoned. He stripped off his rumpled shirt and trousers, stepping out of them with relief, and caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. Yikes, he thought. Dark circles under his ice blue eyes, a few new bruises blooming on his arms from last night's scuffles, and generally a tired pallor to his usually warm tan complexion. I look like a ghost, he muttered. A ghost in dire need of a shower. He tapped the shower panel and water cascaded down from the ceiling in a steaming curtain. Hiroshi stepped in and groaned with pleasure as the hot water pounded against his sore shoulders and back. It was heavenly. For a long moment, he simply stood there, eyes closed, letting the heat seep into his muscles. Weeks of tension and grime seemed to melt off and swirl down the drain. He found himself almost lightheaded with relief. How long had it been since he'd had a proper shower, not a 2-minute rinse or a cold river dunk? Too long. And here he was in a luxurious safe house hotel, washing off the filth of war. It was such a stark contrast to the life he'd been leading just a short time ago. Only yesterday, though it felt like ages, he'd been crawling through an enemy facility, dodging bullets and moral nightmares. And now he was an assistant director with a 5-star roof over his head and people calling him Sama. The world truly had turned upside down. He finished rinsing off and turned the water off with a reluctant sigh. Every fiber of him wanted to linger under that soothing stream, but duty tugged at the back of his mind. Time, you need rest too. Grabbing a plush towel, Hiroshi briskly dried himself and donned the fresh clothes, simple black track pants and a grey t-shirt. He'd long ago learned to sleep or lounge in clothes he could move in at a second's notice. When he emerged from the bathroom, he was greeted by a heartwarming sight. Almost all of his Pokémon were curled up or stretched out in various states of contented dozing around the suite. The aftermath of a good meal. Machop was sprawled on the rug right in front of the now closed balcony curtains, belly up and snoring softly, one dumbbell still clutched in its arms like a teddy bear. Charmeleon had clambered onto one of the large armchairs, promptly claimed a throw pillow, and was curled atop it. Despite its tough guy persona, the fire type looked positively cuddly now, tail draped over the armrest and ticking like a metronome in sleepy rhythm. Hiroshi carefully noted the tail's flame was safely away from the fabric. Wartortle had indeed decided the bathroom tiles were the best spot. Through the open door Hiroshi could see it snoozing on its back, using a rolled towel as an impromptu pillow. Ivysaur had moved to be near the balcony door, perhaps sensing the dawn sunlight beyond. It was napping with its plant bulb angled toward where the morning rays would soon shine in, soaking up even sleep-time photosynthesis. Laren, after polishing off its bowl of kibble, had unceremoniously flopped down right next to the empty bowl. The steel rock type was now fast asleep on its stomach, legs tucked under its bulky body, looking like a small armored tank parked for the night. By the coffee table, Swablu and Kurla were snuggled together on the sofa. Swablu had half burrowed itself into a spare plush cushion, only its round blue head poking out, fast asleep with a satisfied smile. Akimi the Kurla was sitting upright but her eyes were closed, her head nodding forward in that fight sleepy but Kenti mode. As Hiroshi watched, Daisy draped a light shawl, that she'd summoned from who knows where, around the dozing Kurla's shoulders and eased her down to lie against a pillow. The little Kurla instinctively curled up against Swablu's soft feathers, sighing in contentment. Daisy, seemingly tireless, floated the now empty plates and bowls from the floor and table back toward the kitchen, doing a bit of tidying up via telekinesis. Alakazam had actually moved out onto the small balcony that adjoined the living room. Through the sliding glass door, Hiroshi could see him seated cross-legged facing the horizon, eyes closed in meditation as the very first sliver of sunrise painted the sky. Alakazam would likely remain there, standing guard in his own way, until it was time to leave. And Dragonair. Hiroshi felt a light touch brush his damp hair. He glanced up to find Dragonair's lithe form coiled around part of the ceiling molding, the iridescent serpentine Pokémon hovering just above him. It had gently nudged him with its tail as he came out, perhaps simply greeting him. Dragonair's blue eyes regarded him kindly, and it gave a soft, whispery trill. With a smile, Hiroshi reached up and stroked Dragonair's silky head. "All good up there," he whispered. Dragonair nodded almost regally, then uncurled from the ceiling and glided down. Like a floating ribbon, it looped once around Hiroshi in an affectionate embrace, its scales cool against his warm neck, before it then drifted across the room to curl up on a long chaise lounge by the window. Dragonair rested its head atop its coils, the three crystalline orbs on its tail softly glowing. Its gaze remained on Hiroshi, watchful but serene, as if it too intended to keep a gentle vigil while he rested. He padded quietly into the kitchen, where Daisy had levitated all the dirty dishes neatly into the sink. She gave him a soft telepathic nudge. "Go rest, I'll handle this," clearly intending to clean up with her powers. Hiroshi chuckled and held up his hands in surrender. "Yes ma'am," he whispered jokingly. Hiroshi grabbed his plate of food, now a bit cool, but still perfectly edible, and a bottle of water, then tiptoed into the bedroom area. As he lowered himself onto the edge of the massive bed, the mattress gave beneath him like a fluffy cloud, drawing out a sigh of relief he hadn't meant to make aloud. It was, without question, the most comfortable thing he had touched in months. He set the water on the nightstand and balanced the plate on his lap, slowly chewing a piece of beef. It was still flavorful, but the chill dulled the spices. He looked around the dim, tranquil room, his gaze falling on his Pokémon. All of them had dozed off after their meal, spread out across the room in their preferred corners and cushions. The only sounds were the gentle crackle of Charmeleon's tail fire and the soft duet of snores from Machop and Laren, one high and nasally, the other a slow, vibrating rumble. Hiroshi chuckled under his breath. "I should record that and sell it as a relaxation track." Then his eyes flicked toward Charmeleon, still awake and curled on the nearby chair, its tail lazily flicking. Hiroshi held up his plate. "Hey, mind giving me a hand with this?" he whispered. Charmeleon tilted its head, then grunted and slowly raised its tail toward Hiroshi's plate. The fire at its tip burned low and steady, casting a warm orange glow. Hiroshi leaned the edge of his plate close to the flame, hovering it just long enough for the beef to sizzle faintly. After a few seconds, he pulled it back, tested a bite, and let out a pleased hum. "Now that," he murmured with a grin, "tastes wonderful." Charmeleon gave a low, satisfied growl and turned its head, clearly proud of its assistance. He didn't realize how hungry he was until he started eating, but fatigue was catching up even faster. After finishing roughly half the plate, Hiroshi decided that was enough to stave off hunger for a bit of sleep. He set the dish aside on the nightstand and swung his legs up onto the bed. Oh wow," he breathed as he lay back against the pillows. The bed was incredible, the kind you sink into as if into a warm cloud. Clean, crisp sheets, yet soft to the touch, a mattress that supported every inch of him just right. Hiroshi's whole body practically sang in relief. He hadn't slept in a real bed, a safe bed, in months, easily. Possibly not since his last stint in Japan over a year ago. Certainly never while he was undercover abroad. He'd had cots, sleeping bags, the occasional dingy motel mattress with springs poking his ribs, but nothing like this. He pulled the duvet over himself and let out a long, deep sigh. For a moment, guilt tried to creep in, telling him he shouldn't indulge in this comfort while there was so much work to be done, while danger still lurked out there. But he pushed that thought away firmly. Makima herself had ordered him to rest now, and his own mentor Yoshimura insisted as well. They're right, he thought, eyes already growing heavy as the first light of dawn pressed gently against the curtains. The battles will resume soon enough. In fact, in a little over an hour, he'd have to be up and back to the command center, leading the charge. But right now, nap time. Chapter 39, The Planning Session. A low hum of fluorescent lights resonated in the small concrete briefing room deep beneath Tokyo. In this PSIA safehouse, a secret sublevel far below the city's busy streets, the atmosphere crackled with quiet tension. Hiroshi Kobayashi stood at the head of a steel table, flanked by the loyal team that had answered the all-hands recall. They were dressed not in combat gear now, but in crisp business attire or PSIA office uniforms appropriate to their new cover roles. Despite the civilian clothes, every eye around that table was sharp with resolve. One slip in the coming hours could spell disaster. Makima, the Director General herself, leaned against the wall with arms crossed, observing her hand-picked operatives. Even at this early hour she was immaculate in a charcoal suit, auburn hair neatly tied. Her gaze swept across the team as Hiroshi cleared his throat to begin. Yoshimura, the grizzled senior advisor who'd mentored many of them, stood nearby, one hand on the back of a chair, offering a reassuring nod to Hiroshi. This was Hiroshi's show now. "All right, everyone," Hiroshi said softly, yet his voice carried in the hush. "Phase 1 begins today. We're about to step into the PSIA Kanto branch and live among vipers." He allowed a brief glance at each teammate: Aki, Himeno, Denji, Power, Kobani, Angel, Madoka, Kishive. These names were known only to each other and a scant few cleared staff. To the rest of the agency, they would just be new faces in new places. "Our job for the next week," Hiroshi continued, "is to map the entire web of traitors embedded in that branch, every mole, every double agent, every corrupted liaison. We do this quietly, no guns, no drama. Just observation, mind games, and subtle pushes." "Understood." A chorus of curt nods and quiet "yes, sir" replies circled the table. They had faced terrorists and monsters together, but infiltrating their own home agency was a different kind of daunting. Hiroshi felt the weight of their trust and the enormity of the task. He managed a faint smile to lighten the mood. "Remember, we're under our real names and histories, but we each have a persona to play." He tapped a thin dossier in front of him, Makima's carefully crafted cover stories for each of them. "Makima-san pulled strings to embed us legitimately. No disguises this time. Appear to be exactly who you say you are, while we quietly pull threads loose." Makima stepped forward then, her voice low but firm. "Each of you has been assigned to a division that positions you close to our prime suspects." She nodded to Hiroshi, ceding the briefing to him, but the pride in her eyes was clear. This plan was their brainchild, and now it was in motion. Hiroshi picked up from her cue, gesturing to a schematic of the PSIA Tokyo headquarters displayed on a wall monitor. Red dots marked certain departments: intelligence analysis, technical research, administration, field operations, even the director's office. "We suspect foreign intelligence liaisons, corporate plants, and even cabinet office spies are all embedded across the branch," he said, referencing the intel Madoka and Makima had compiled. "They act like loyal staff on the surface. We will treat them as such until we know who they are." His blue eyes hardened a fraction. "Our one advantage is that they don't know how we'll detect them." He placed a hand on 3 Pokeball at his belt, one of 3 there. "Daisy, Akemi, and Alakazam," he said, naming the only Pokémon he'd be carrying openly into the field. At this, Makima allowed herself a tiny, knowing smile. Everyone here understood the significance. Daisy the garde voir, Kurla Akemi and his silent Alakazam were about to become the unseen blade of this operation. "Most of the agency has no idea what these psychic types are truly capable of," Hiroshi reminded the team quietly. "Or even that they exist in these evolved forms." He exchanged a look with Aki and Himeno. Both had seen Daisy and the mustached Alakazam in action before, yet even they were still occasionally awed by the Pokémon's power. In the wider PSIA ranks, third-stage evolutions like Gardevoir and Alakazam were practically myths, curiosities at best. An Abra or Ralts was known to exist, sure, but evolving them was rumored to be impossible or too unstable. If any staff at the Kanto branch noticed Hiroshi's partners, they would likely dismiss them as harmless oddities. Kishive let out a short breath, arms folded. The scarred veteran's voice rasped in the dim room. So the snakes won't know the mongoose is among them, he muttered, nodding in approval. He was here as both participant and overseer of the younger agents, a role Makima trusted him with. Good. They'll underestimate you, assistant director. He smirked as he said Hiroshi's new title, still finding it a bit humorous. Hiroshi didn't mind the tease, he wanted the team relaxed but focused. Exactly. I'm officially the naive newbie with a fancy rank I didn't earn. He straightened his suit jacket. This morning he'd chosen a slightly too large navy blazer that made him look even younger, as if he'd raided a parent's closet. The image in the mirror had been intentional, bright-eyed and green. I'll be playing the part of a Tokyo University prodigy who got his assistant director post through pure nepotism. A tiny grin tugged at his lips, and a couple of the team members chuckled softly. Denji gave Hiroshi a thumbs up of encouragement, clearly relishing the irony that their most experienced spy was masquerading as an unqualified kid. They'll think I'm manipulable. We'll use that. Hiroshi's gaze shifted to the others. Each of you has a cover assignment Makima arranged. You're to blend in and observe without drawing suspicion. Let's go over them. He glanced at Madoka, who adjusted his glasses and began reading off the list from his tablet. Aki Hayakawa, newly appointed to Internal Affairs within the Kanto branch. Officially, he's an experienced field agent rotated into HQ for a desk role after distinguished overseas service. In reality, Aki will be our spearhead in investigating other agents' records and conduct. Keep an eye on the execs and senior staff, Aki, Hiroshi said. The dark-haired young man gave a tight nod, jaw set. As a cool-headed professional, Aki was perfect to scrutinize colleagues from the inside, and any mole who tried to cover their tracks would have to get past his keen gaze. Himeno, assigned as a psychological analyst in the personnel division. Her one-eyed, easygoing demeanor hid razor-sharp intuition honed in the field. With a role in HR and agent wellness, Himeno would have access to personnel files and an excuse to talk to anyone under the pretense of routine evaluations or counseling. Use that empathy of yours, Hiroshi said softly. Himeno winked and saluted with 2 fingers, lightening the mood. Roger. I'll make them comfortable, maybe too comfortable, she added wryly. A few smiled at that. If anyone could charm secrets out of a hardened spy with a disarming joke and a cigarette break, it was Himeno. Denji and Power, both were slotted into the Tactical Operations Division as fresh field operatives recalled from abroad. Ostensibly, Denji was back from a training stint in South America and Power from a security exchange program. Their cover gave them reason to roam the facility weapons lockers, training gyms, motor pools under the guise of orientation. Hiroshi leveled a warning look at the pair, who were already fidgeting like school kids itching for recess. Denji, Power, no picking fights, understand? Yes, boss, Denji grinned, though his foot tapped with barely contained energy. Power clicked her tongue but nodded, her red eyes alight. We will behave, until it's time not to, she said, bearing a predatory grin that made Kobani flinch. Aki rolled his eyes and gave Power a light elbow to calm her. Subtlety wasn't Power's forte, but she had a nose for ferreting out confidence, or weakness, in others. With careful supervision by Aki and Kishive, the 2 youngest agents would be invaluable distractions. People tended to speak freely when dismissing someone as brash or foolish. Kobani, placed in intelligence analysis as a junior data analyst. Her timid demeanor and genuine nervousness were, ironically, perfect camouflage. Kobani would sift through reports and feeds, watching for anomalies or evidence of intel being tampered with or misdirected. Hiroshi caught Kobani's wide-eyed expression and offered an encouraging smile. You'll do great. Just act like it's your first day, which it is. Kobani swallowed and nodded quickly. I'll try, she stammered. Himeno patted her shoulder gently. Everyone knew Kobani's anxiety belied her true competence. And if a mole tried to take advantage of shy little Kobani, they'd be in for a surprise. Angel, reassigned to the Records and Archives section. Officially, the pale, lethargic young man was a transfer from Okinawa's bureau known for his prodigious memory. In truth, Angel would quietly pore over classified archives and monitor communications logs for any signs of leaks. Angel yawned and gave a lazy wave. "As long as I don't have to lift anything heavy," he drawled. Makima's lips twitched in a tiny smile. "Just paper and hard drives, Angel." The ethereal-looking agent nodded and tucked a strand of hair behind his ear. Despite his aloof attitude, Angel's mind was as sharp as a honed blade. He wouldn't miss a clue in the paperwork that passed through his hands. Madoka, given a role in IT security and surveillance. If anyone wondered why a mild-mannered analyst who nearly resigned months ago was suddenly back, they'd assume Makima personally convinced him, which was exactly true. Madoka would ride the desks at the tech department, auditing system security. That position gave him cover to run quiet searches into emails, camera footage, and access logs for suspicious patterns. He had already compiled an encrypted list of personnel with anomalies in their records, a starting point for their sweep. "I'll be invisible in the server room," Madoka assured, pushing up his glasses. "Nobody ever bothers the IT guy until something breaks." The slight smile on his face belied the intense focus in his eyes. Kishive, officially, he was listed as a senior training instructor rotating in from HQ's academy, a plausible reason for a grizzled older operative to roam the halls. Kishive would have carte blanche to drop in on any tactical briefings or range practices, and to scrutinize security protocols. "I'll play the crusty old veteran kicking the young agents into shape," he said with a wolfish grin. "That part won't even be acting." A few laughs broke the tension. But everyone also understood Kishive's real role, guardian. If any of the traitors tried something violent or if an emergency extraction was needed, Kishive would be the first to act. His single eye glinted with anticipation, the old hunter ready for new prey. Chapter 40, The Planning Session, 2. Hiroshi concluded the roster and took a breath. "Makima and Yoshimura will remain outside the direct fray," he said. "Director Makima will coordinate backups and handle any political fallout from a safe distance, and Yoshimura-san will liaise with trusted contacts to prepare for eventual raids or arrests once we have the intel." In other words, the team had support in the shadows. Makima gave a curt nod. "I'll be monitoring everything from here and from HQ's formal channels. If you uncover urgent threats, say a bomb in the building or immediate danger, signal me at once. Otherwise, gather evidence quietly. We strike only when we have the full picture." Her amber eyes hardened. "We won't get a second chance at this. If the enemy gets a whiff that we're hunting them, they'll scatter like rats." A hush fell. Each agent felt the gravity of her words. The PSIA Kanto branch was a den of traitors entwined with foreign agencies, corrupt corporations, even strings pulled from the cabinet office itself. It was no exaggeration that if they failed to expose the entire network in one sweep, those enemies would disappear underground or, worse, retaliate with potentially catastrophic force. Hiroshi looked around at his friends and managed a confident smile that he half felt. "We've got one shot," he said quietly. "Let's make it count. Trust your instincts, and trust Daisy, Akemi, and Alakazam." At the mention of the Pokémon, there was an almost imperceptible rustle in a shadowy corner of the room. If one didn't know better, one might think it was just the flicker of a dying light. But Hiroshi knew it was Daisy, listening invisibly alongside Alakazam even now. Kurla Akemi stood openly at Hiroshi's side, a petite, graceful figure in green and white who could easily be mistaken for a decorative mascot. The small empathy Pokémon looked around at the gathered humans with bright, understanding eyes. She was quivering slightly, not with fear, but eagerness. She could sense the determination, and yes, the nerves, in the room, and she hummed a soft KIR, as if to say, "We're ready." Hiroshi placed a gentle hand on Akemi's head. "Akemi will accompany me in the open. As far as anyone at HQ knows, she's just a pet girl I keep around." He flashed a grin. Perks of nepotism. I'm spoiled enough to bring my own office Pokémon. Quiet chuckles met that remark. It wasn't uncommon for high-ranking officials to have a personal Pokémon as a status symbol or security measure, usually something mundane like a Growlithe or a Pidgey. A Curla was rare, but not beyond believability, especially if one thought the new assistant director was an indulged youth with expensive tastes. No one would suspect that this elegant little creature would be silently scanning emotional auras and flagging every lie uttered in her presence. As for Daisy and Alakazam, Hiroshi went on, they'll remain out of sight. They'll move through the building as needed cloaked. He exchanged a wordless thought with Daisy, knowing the Gardevoir caught it from wherever she hid. Will be careful. In Shanghai, Daisy had walked unseen among enemies by bending light and warping perceptions. In a crowded office full of alert agents, it would be trickier, but Gardevoir and Alakazam would find ways to perch high in corners, masquerade as shadows, even slip between camera blind spots with teleport tops. And if anyone did catch a glimpse of the white gown or the spoons glinting, they'd likely dismiss it as a trick of the light or one of HQ's own security experiments. After all, who would really imagine that an Alakazam, a Pokémon of legend, was hovering above the ceiling panels, reading their every surface thought? Daisy's telepathy will keep us linked, Hiroshi added. She'll relay what she and Alakazam pick up from people's minds. Akemi, he gave the Curla a fond little shake by the shoulder, will be my immediate lie detector and emotional radar. Akemi beamed at the praise, her red eyes blinking solemnly as if she fully grasped her mission. Between them, we'll know who's hiding something or who reacts oddly when certain topics come up. He looked at Madoka. Once we have leads, feed them to Madoka. He can cross-check communications and files in the system. Madoka held up a secure phone. We'll use the encrypted chat app on these. Preloaded on all devices we issued last night. Each team member had received a sleek encrypted smartphone courtesy of Makima's office during the pre-dawn briefing. Keep messages sparse and in code. Assume someone at HQ could be monitoring typical channels. The code, as they all knew, was based on innocuous phrases. A simple "need coffee with extra sugar" could mean "I have a suspect, send Daisy," whereas "lunch meeting postponed" might signal "aboard, we're compromised." They had memorized a whole lexicon of these benign-sounding signals. It would have to do. Constant direct telepathy with everyone was too challenging over distance for the Pokémon, and gathering in person would risk exposure. Makima pushed off the wall, stepping into the circle of light. The planning was done, now it was time to move. You all have your assignments and entry badges. She swept her gaze over them one last time, her face composed but eyes shining with conviction. This is where the real battle for Tokyo begins, in the corridors of our own agency. Stay sharp. Watch each other's backs. Then, in a rare softening, she added, and remember, you're not alone in there. You have each other, and you have us just a call away. Makima's faith in them was almost palpable. Kobani squared her shoulders a bit more, Aki's chin lifted with determination, and Denji puffed out his chest with a roguish grin. Hiroshi clipped Curla's pokeball to his belt, for now Akemi would walk in with him, but best to arrive appearing contained and docile, and gathered his papers. We'll stagger our arrivals to avoid looking like a unit, he ordered. Turning to the eldest agent, he quipped, Kishive-san, care to chauffeur the newbie boss on his first day? Kishive snorted, already shrugging on a plain black overcoat. Hat, driving Miss Daisy and her boy? Why not, he said, eyes glinting with humor at the Gardevoir's name. At least I know you won't complain about my music choice. The others filed out behind them, tension easing just enough for a few smirks and deep breaths. As they dispersed toward the surface exit and awaiting vehicles, Hiroshi felt Makima's hand briefly touch his arm. He paused. She met his eyes, her voice too low for anyone else to hear. You know what's at stake? I do, he replied equally quietly. A beat of understanding passed between them. So much depended on this young man who now had to play the fool. Makima didn't need to say good luck, her confidence was clear. Hiroshi gave a reassuring nod, then turned and followed Kishive up the concrete stairs, into the grey dawn light of Tokyo. Chapter 41, Day 1 into the Lion's Den. Morning in Chiyoda Ward, the PSIA Kanto branch headquarters loomed as a nondescript, modern office block in a district of government buildings. By 0900 hours, employees streamed in through glass doors, badges flashing at turnstiles, shoes clacking on polished floors. Security checkpoints hummed as guards in dark suits watched vigilantly. On the surface, it was any other busy weekday at Japan's premier intelligence agency. Inside, however, a quiet war was about to be waged. A black sedan pulled up to the curb outside the front plaza. From the driver's side emerged Kishive, looking every bit the no-nonsense instructor in a tailored but slightly rumpled suit, a PSIA lapel pin glinting on his collar. He circled around and opened the passenger door with a mock flourish. "End of the line, kid." "Showtime," he muttered under his breath. Out stepped Hiroshi, tugging once at the hem of his suit jacket and smoothing an earnest, if a touch nervous, smile onto his face. In the morning sun, his silver-white hair and youthful features caught a few glances from passers-by. He certainly didn't resemble the typical somber bureaucrat. That was exactly the point. Slinging a slim briefcase over his shoulder, Hiroshi took a breath and strode toward the entrance, Kishive following a respectful 2 steps behind as though escorting a dignitary. At Hiroshi's heel trotted Kurla Akemi, drawing more than a few stares of curiosity. The petite psychic type with her green bobbed head and flowing tutu-like dress looked like a performer's Pokémon, not something one expected to see in a spy agency lobby. A couple of junior agents nudged each other and whispered, but no one dared question it openly, not when the young man in front of the Kurla was displaying an assistant director's badge on a lanyard. Inside the lobby, the air was cool and smelled of fresh coffee. Marble floors and tasteful, minimalist decor projected an image of calm efficiency. Beneath that veneer, Hiroshi could feel the currents of tension, or maybe that was Kurla's empathic sense bleeding into him. Ahead, 2 uniformed security officers manned a scanning station. They straightened when they saw Kishive and Hiroshi approach. Assistant Director Kobayashi. One guard, a square-jawed man with graying hair, addressed Hiroshi politely, checking the badge credentials that had popped up on his console. He kept his expression neutral, but Hiroshi did not miss the slight widening of the man's eyes as he took in the age of the new AD. Clearly, word of his appointment had not spread to every rank yet, or if it had, many likely assumed it a joke. Hiroshi summoned a perfect mix of bashfulness and authority. "Yes, that's me," he replied, voice calm but a touch deferential. "Good morning. I apologize, I'm still learning the ropes here." He gave a slight, polite bow, just enough to play the respectful junior, but not so low as to seem lacking confidence. The guard seemed to relax a hair at Hiroshi's courteous tone. He even offered a small smile. "Welcome to headquarters, sir. We weren't expecting you at the main entrance. Director Takeda mentioned you might start later in the week." The man's eyes flicked to Akemi at Hiroshi's side. The Kurla blinked innocently up at him. "And, is this Pokémon registered, sir?" "Oh. Sorry." Hiroshi gave an embarrassed laugh and rubbed the back of his neck. "This is Akemi, my Kurla. She's harmless. To be honest, I wasn't sure about protocol, but she hates staying in her ball." He leaned in with a conspiring grin. "Between you and me, my uncle said I could bring her along to keep me company. I promise she won't be a distraction." There it was, a subtle name drop of some nebulous patron. In truth, Makima had crafted Hiroshi's fake nepotism backstory around a fictitious uncle in the cabinet secretariat. It was amazing how far a hint of family connection went in smoothing bureaucratic wrinkles. The guard chuckled softly and held up a scanner wand. "Understood, sir. I'll just run a quick scan for security purposes." He passed the wand over Kurla, whose big red eyes followed it curiously. The handheld device beeped green, detecting no dangerous weapons or anomalous energy beyond the baseline psychic emanations one might expect from that species. If only it knew the potency of those emanations. All clear. Enjoy your day, Assistant Director. The guard motioned them through. As Hiroshi walked on, he overheard the second guard whisper under his breath, "Damn, they're getting younger every year." Followed by a low chuckle. Hiroshi kept his face pleasantly blank, but inwardly he felt a stab of satisfaction. Let them underestimate him, the groundwork was laid. Once past security, he entered the central atrium of HQ overhead. An open skylight flooded the space with natural light. Balconies of 4 floors of offices ringed the atrium, and glass-walled conference rooms bustled with activity. Phones rang, printers whirred, heels clicked. Just another Monday in the intelligence world. Hiroshi walked slowly, taking it all in with a mixture of awe and timidness that he played up for any onlookers. Kurla Akemi trotted at his side, emitting a soft telepathic pulse that only he could sense, a sort of gentle background hum that he recognized as curiosity tinged with nervousness. It mirrored his own feelings, and possibly those of honest staff around them. So far, nothing unusual. Kishive peeled off with a nod, mumbling about reporting to the training division. That was the plan, they wouldn't stick together inside. Hiroshi was on his own for the moment, heading for the elevators that would take him to the executive floor where his new office and immediate staff awaited. As he crossed the atrium, he spotted Himeno by the coffee kiosk, stirring sugar into a paper cup. She caught his eye briefly and gave the subtlest tilt of her head. All okay. Already dressed as an office lady with a knee-length skirt and her signature eye patch, Himeno looked like she belonged. She was engaged in cheerful small talk with a bespectacled man from accounting, who was gesturing animatedly about something. Himeno's laughter drifted over, light and disarming. If one didn't know better, you'd think she was just a friendly new colleague making friends. Only a slight crinkle in her brow as she glanced at a passing figure hinted she was also probing. Hiroshi didn't linger, he had to maintain his own role. Still, the sight comforted him, the team was slipping into place. Chapter 42, Into the Lion's Den, 2. Up on the 12th floor, the doors opened to a quieter, carpeted hallway. Plaques on the walls indicated this was the home of the branch's leadership, the bureau director's office, conference rooms, and a few high-ranking officials' quarters, including now, Assistant Director Hiroshi Kobayashi. A middle-aged woman in a navy suit stood waiting by the elevator, the branch director's secretary, presumably. She bowed hastily as Hiroshi stepped out. "Kobayashi-san? Welcome. I'm Tanaka, Director Takeda's secretary. The director is expecting you in the main conference room for the division heads meeting starting at 9:30. Her eyes flickered down to Akemi for a half-second, surprise registering at the odd companion, but she was too professional to comment. "Would you like me to show you to your office first?" "Yes, please. And, nice to meet you." Hiroshi returned her bow, maybe a tad deeper than protocol required, as if unused to being bowed to. Miss Tanaka smiled kindly. He could tell she already pegged him as an unseasoned youngster to be gently guided. "Perfect. Right this way, sir." As he followed her down the hall, Kurla's grip on his trouser leg tightened ever so slightly. Hiroshi didn't break stride but focused inward. "Akemi, what is it?" The Kurla's psychic voice wasn't as articulate as Daisy's, but he got a burst of feeling, wariness, a spike of caution. Not from the secretary. Tanaka seemed genuinely welcoming, but from somewhere nearby. Possibly behind one of those closed office doors they passed. Someone in an adjacent room might have noticed the new arrival and felt threatened. It was hard to pinpoint. Akemi's abilities were radius-based. She sensed emotions flaring within perhaps a dozen meters. A sudden cold prickle on the back of Hiroshi's neck told him Daisy had also slipped into his mind. She must be tailing at a distance. In a faint whisper of thought, Daisy conveyed, "2 people down the hall just started whispering about you." Her mental tone was wry. "They were surprised you're so young." A pause. One is curious, the other is nervous. Hiroshi gave the slightest nod to show he heard. Likely some of the entrenched staff were uneasy at any shake-up or, if one of them was a mole, they might be worrying who this political appointee really was. Tanaka opened a door on the left. This will be your office, Kobayashi-san. Inside was a modest but well-furnished space, a large mahogany desk, a few chairs, a bookshelf with empty shelves awaiting personal touches, and a window overlooking the Imperial Palace grounds. Not bad for a 21-year-old rookie. On the desk sat a neat stack of folders and a nameplate reading Assistant Director Hiroshi Kobayashi. It all felt surreal to him for a moment, but Hiroshi quickly reminded himself that the nameplate was as much a prop as any disguise he'd ever worn. He set his briefcase down and gave Kurla a small nod. Akemi immediately scampered to a plush armchair in the corner and settled there demurely, as if trained to sit quietly. Tanaka watched this with faint amusement. Adorable. I'm sure she'll be no trouble, the secretary remarked. If you need anything, sir, set up on your computer, supplies, just dial 0 for admin support. She gestured to a phone on the desk. Shall I escort you to the conference now? Most of the division chiefs are already gathering. Hiroshi glanced at the clock. 9:28. Right on time. He felt a flutter in his stomach but channeled it into an eager, naive energy. Yes, let's not keep them waiting. I'm still trying to remember who's who. He grabbed a leather portfolio, inside which he had a pad for notes and a hidden pocket with a tiny COMM device that Daisy could use to whisper in his ear undetected. As Tanaka led him out again, he left Kurla in the office for now. Be good, Akemi. I'll be back soon, he said over his shoulder. The Kurla tilted her head and gave a sweet, warbling curly in response, looking for all the world like a content pet. The moment the door shut, Akemi's expression blanked into focus. She was now alone, but through Daisy, she'd remain linked to Hiroshi's mind throughout the meeting. At the end of the hall, double doors opened into conference room 12C. A long oval table dominated the space, and floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in daylight. Around that table sat a dozen people, the section chiefs and deputy directors who ran the Kanto branch's daily operations. At the head was Director Takeda, the man Hiroshi was theoretically second to. Takeda was a distinguished-looking fellow in his early 50s, hair thinning but posture stiffly upright, radiating authority. As Hiroshi entered, Takeda stood and managed a diplomatic smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Ah, Kobayashi-kun. Welcome, Takeda greeted, using the familiar kun honorific that emphasized Hiroshi's junior status. Please, join us. We were just doing introductions. The director's tone was polite, but there was a subtle undertone one might mistake for condescension. Hiroshi bowed respectfully. Thank you, Director Takeda. Apologies if I'm a few minutes late. He took an empty seat near the midpoint of the table, acutely aware of all the eyes sizing him up. This room held some of the very people he was here to investigate. He felt Daisy's invisible presence slide into the room as well, likely hovering near the ceiling corner, cloaked from view. Alakazam would be nearby too, perhaps monitoring from just outside the door or via telepathy relay. Game on! The introductions continued. One by one the division heads gave their names and roles for Hiroshi's benefit. Hiroshi listened earnestly, nodding, sometimes jotting a note to look studious. Meanwhile, he focused on the subtler symphony of thoughts and feelings that Daisy and Kurla were feeding him. Chapter 43, Into the Lion's Den, 3. Mori, Counterintelligence Division Chief, said a lean man with cold eyes. This one's skeptical, Daisy whispered in Hiroshi's mind. Indeed, Mori barely concealed a sneer as he spoke. I look forward to showing you how we do things here, Assistant Director. The thought that flickered off him was something like, little brat probably hasn't seen a day of real work. Hiroshi fought the urge to smirk and instead responded with an appreciative smile and a bob of his head. I look forward to learning, Mori-san. Sato, Technical research, offered a woman in a lab coat who gave Hiroshi a tight smile. Her surface thoughts came through indistinctly. Daisy hinted that Sato was outwardly calm but guarded. Technical research was tied closely to the recent laboratory theft incident, where experimental Pokémon tech was stolen in the betrayal. Sato's department had a lot to prove now. Was her guardedness simply stress, or hiding guilt? Kurla, from afar, pinged Hiroshi with a subtle gut sensation, unease. Not necessarily malicious, perhaps fear of blame. Hiroshi made a mental note. Hayashi, admin and finance. An older balding man nodded to Hiroshi. He seemed genial enough, but Daisy immediately flagged a discordant note. His thoughts were flitting, as if checking off some list, or plan. When Hayashi smiled, Kurla's distant sense twitched a hint of falsehood, maybe. Hiroshi memorized his face. And so it went. The HR director, a middle-aged lady who welcomed Hiroshi kindly, Kurla read genuine warmth, likely not an enemy. The operations chief, a burly ex-military type who looked almost insulted to be outranked by a 20-year-old, no strong malice, just bruised ego. The foreign liaison officer, a sharply dressed man who gave a broad smile and spoke perfect English accented Japanese in greeting. Daisy murmured that his mind was oscillating between Japanese and another language, Mandarin, perhaps unconsciously. Hiroshi engaged him in a bit of small talk about his background, and the man smoothly answered he'd spent years working with overseas partners. Kurla pulsed steady, controlled emotions from him. Too steady? A possible foreign plant hiding behind diplomatic polish? Time would tell. Then there was Chief of Internal Security, a stern woman named Hasegawa. She actually gave Hiroshi a slight bow of respect, possibly because, as internal security, she'd looked him up and saw the high connections in his file. Her mind was disciplined. Daisy could only skim that she was already thinking about background checks and protecting the director. Could be loyal, or could be a double agent with excellent self-control. Another to watch. Finally, Director Takeda formally welcomed Hiroshi with a rehearsed spiel about young talent infusion and honored to have the cabinet's confidence. Takeda's smile remained pasted on. Daisy slid an impression into Hiroshi's mind. Takeda's thoughts are hard to read. He's trained, guarded, but there's irritation. Possibly he resented having an assistant director foisted on him. If Takeda was dirty, he'd surely be alarmed. If he was clean, he'd still be annoyed. In any case, he was on edge. We trust you'll adapt quickly to our branch's operations, Takeda said. If you need any guidance, my door is open. I understand this is your first assignment in domestic intelligence administration. Hiroshi gave a self-effacing laugh. I admit I have a lot to learn, sir. My background is mostly academic. He placed just a hint of tremor in his voice, like someone trying to sound confident but revealing inexperience. I'm grateful for the support. Director Makima spoke highly of everyone here. At the mention of Makima, he observed reactions carefully. A few around the table stiffened almost imperceptibly. Makima's name carried weight. She had been the one to purge a lot of deadwood even before the betrayal. Loyalists revered her, and traitors surely feared her. The foreign liaison guy's smile faltered a millimeter. Admin Hayashi swallowed. Mori's lip twitched. Hiroshi pretended not to notice and pressed on. I hope I can contribute, perhaps bring a fresh perspective from my studies abroad. One of the deputies, a gruff man from counterintelligence, interjected with a thin veneer of politeness. Assistant Director, since you're new to field work and HQ, how do you plan to approach overseeing operations? Any particular focus you have in mind? The question was innocuous, but the tone underneath said, do you even know what you're doing? It was a test, possibly a trap to make him show his hand. Hiroshi felt a flutter of anxiety in his gut, but Kurla's distant reassurance and Daisy's steady presence bolstered him. He answered with a careful smile, as of now, I'm here to listen and learn. My uncle always said a good leader listens twice as much as he talks. A few smirks and approving nods met that cliché. In the first week, I'll be reviewing the open case files and ongoing projects to familiarize myself. Perhaps I can assist with some inter-department coordination. Sometimes being new, I can spot inefficiencies others might overlook. But I assure you, he added, almost stumbling for effect, I'm not here to step on any toes. I know I'm surrounded by experts. Please treat me as a colleague who's eager to earn your trust. The disarming humility in his words seemed to ease the skepticism in the room. By positioning himself as a harmless newcomer who might even be useful, Hiroshi aimed to lower defenses. As the meeting shifted into routine updates, weekly reports, resource requests, a briefing on a minor intelligence exchange with police, Hiroshi mostly kept quiet. He interjected once or twice with a basic question. Excuse me, what does this acronym stand for? Or sorry, which unit handles that? Playing up the greenhorn act. Each time, someone kindly answered, and he jotted notes. Internally, though, he was running a complex calculus. Daisy and Alakazam caught the equivalent of mental murmurs and fleeting images from the group, a chief worrying if the new AD would dig into his budget report, Admin Hayashi again heart rate elevated when finance misallocations were mentioned, another mentally cursing Makama's meddling. Hiroshi couldn't be sure who, but Daisy flagged it emanated from the far side of the table, likely foreign liaison or Mori in CI. Kurla's input came as subtle mood readings. When a division head spoke about tightening security protocols, one other person's emotional aura spiked with irritation, as if that inconvenienced them. Noted. A telling moment came when the lab tech chief, Sato, reported on efforts to recover data lost in the lab break-in incident. As she spoke solemnly about the measures being taken to prevent another breach, Hiroshi offered a supportive nod. It must have been devastating, what happened with the research theft, he said gently. At that, a palpable chill fell over some of the table. The great betrayal when insiders helped foreign terrorists steal every Pokémon from Japan's central lab was still a raw wound. A few faces clouded with genuine anger or sadness, loyalists, no doubt. But Hiroshi zoomed in on those who went poker straight or downward cast in that instant. One man coughed and fidgeted with his pen. Daisy caught a ghost thought from him, don't think about it, don't think about her *her. Who? A contact? A superior? The man quickly spoke up to gloss over the silence, rest assured, we've increased clearances and background checks since then. It was the internal security chief, Hasegawa. She sounded resolute, but Kurla pinged a spike of nervous energy beneath her calm. Hiroshi filed that away. Maybe Hasegawa was simply pained by the memory of betrayal, or maybe she knew more about that incident than she let on. By the time the meeting adjourned, Hiroshi had a list of half a dozen strong leads, if only in his own mind. As chairs scraped back and executives milled about packing their documents, Director Takeda approached Hiroshi. Walk with me to my office, he offered, courteous but firm. The division chiefs took their leave with polite nods, and Hiroshi found himself accompanying Takeda down the hall. His heart thumped. One-on-one with a potential traitor, or at least a skeptical boss, was delicate. Daisy and Alakazam stayed behind momentarily. It wouldn't do to have psychic eavesdropping obvious around the director, but Akemi in Hiroshi's office was close enough to keep sensing emotional tone.